Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you out here. Yeah, I love the art from the 14th on the walls in here. It makes it look like a whole different room almost. Yes, I saw them. I saw that. All right, we'll call tonight's Housing, Urban Development and Zoning Committee. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone.
He did text and say they couldn't hear anything online. I didn't know if that would be corrected by the time we started.
Okay. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Present.
Vice Chair Sonier.
Present.
Alderman Browning.
Present.
Alderman Aldridge.
Present.
Chair Clerk Hubbard.
Here.
Alderman Cone.
Present.
We have 6 present. We have a quorum.
All right, with that, I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes from Tuesday, October 22nd, 2024.
Second.
It was moved by Vice Chair Sanye and seconded by Alderman Aldridge. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Cone. Alderwoman
Aye.
Schweitzer. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sonier.
Aye.
Alderman Browning.
Aye.
Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
Chair Clerk Hubbard.
Aye.
We have 6 aye votes.
All right, with that, we've approved the minutes. So we do have a couple of things on the agenda this evening. This is a regular HUD's meeting that's usually held at 11 a.m. So we had a colleague that had a bill on that agenda, and in order to accommodate everyone's time and they didn't have to come back and forth twice today, we moved, so that rather we didn't have to come back and forth twice today, we moved it down to this agenda about last week. So we are out of a courtesy, because she is getting here, trying to make sure we accommodate her first so that we can make sure we spend as much time as we can with you all on Board Bill 114, especially since we see now that we have some amendments as well. So what we'll do, we can just take note of this kind of stuff. This is like procedural stuff. Everyone in the room, have you all that wants to speak, have you all signed up to speak? Everyone that's online, if you would like to speak, can you turn your cameras on? Or are you going to move them up one by one, or are they all up now, the ones that's...
I haven't moved them over yet. Will we move them over now?
Yeah, if it's possible, that way we can get that out the way, so when we get to 114, we can just go right into it.
Okay. So if anyone online wants to speak, please raise your hand.
I'm excited to see you all here this evening. This is one of the things I talk about all the time, is constituents coming and participating in this process. This is the only time during the legislative process that you all are able to participate. So I'm just grateful for you all taking the opportunity to come. This is the type of thing that we need more of down here in our process. So again, I'm excited about that. And while she's bringing, are they all over?
They're all moved over now.
Okay, can you all turn your cameras on? Where I'm going to swear everybody in at the same time, so that when we move in the agenda to Board Bill 114, we'll be past that part. It's just the 3 of them? Is it just the 3 of them? Okay. perfect timing. Take a deep breath, Sue. All right.
Mr. Ray, could you please turn your camera on?
Well, we was moving right along, so I'm gonna swear them in while I have them all up, and then we'll go to you.
It's just 3.
Okay.
Raise a
Can
speaker.
everyone in the room that signed up to speak and the ones online raise your right hand and swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Yay. All right. Okay. So, Alderwoman Keys raised her hand. Okay. So we'll go ahead and move forward in the agenda. Item number 1, Board Bill 59, introduced by Alderwoman Keys. You are recognized.
Testing. Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. And Alderwoman Shameen Clark-Hubbard, thank you so much for your patience, and thank the rest of the committee for your patience this evening. I am running around doing things in the community. And so I'm very happy to be here to speak about Board Bill number 59. Could I please have the clerk to read the summary? Thank you.
Board Bill number 59, introduced by Alderwoman Laura Keys. An ordinance authorizing and directing the mayor and comptroller of the city of St. Louis to execute upon receipt of and in consideration of the sum of $10 and other good and valuable consideration, a quit claim deed to remise, release, forever quit claim unto Bethlehem Missionary Baptist Church, certain city-owned property located in the city block of 1883, which property is known as 3509 Cousins Avenue in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, and containing an emergency clause.
All righty. So Board Bill 59, this is a really simple bill. Bethlehem Church has been caring for this lot for a very, very long time because it sits right next to their church and made the neighborhood and the church look so bad. They started taking care of this very early on. And so in working with the comptroller's office, this is a city-owned lot, um, they asked if they could have that lot. And so in light of them caring for the lot, taking care of a responsibility that was not theirs for the city of St. Louis, I think this is an excellent thing for them to have custody of that particular lot so that they can expand their ministry. Don't know how many of you all know about the church, but this is a working church. And if you know me, you know I love a working church. I love it when churches provide wraparound services and they feed the community in more than one way other than food. And this is such a situation with Bethlehem that they truly have been taking care of and feeding this community in so many ways for so many decades. And so it is only fitting that they have the right to have this particular parcel to expand their ministry.
All right. Thank you, Alderwoman Keys. I will note that when you were on your way, Comptroller Green did reach out to me and tell me not only of her support, but that you were on your way. So
Yeah.
hold on.
I was at a community event and I almost forgot actually.
Oh, that's okay.
And so-
Okay. I know this was different because we.
An evening, yes. thank
Okay.
you.
We'll start with the committee for questions. Alderman Cone.
No questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Alderwoman Swicer.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Alderman Keys, for coming. This isn't something I'm super familiar with, this quick claim process with the city selling property in this way. Is this something that's consistently?
This is not new. In many instances, there
Quick
are parcels of property that are actually owned by the city, not LRA property. And so sometimes it's just a tiny sliver of a lot that might be next to a home that the homeowner has been taking care of for a prolonged period. And, in some cases, people never ask. They just keep taking care of it. But in this case, Bethlehem has asked for the lot that they have been caring for.
Right. It's just that normally there's a different city process for purchasing land that isn't through a quick claim deed. I've never seen that I'm aware of in my time on the Board of Aldermen a quick claim deed for this. So the comptroller is supportive, but she's not here to speak. Or why is this a different process than? For city sale of land and
That I cannot. You certainly have been here longer than I have, so
yeah,
I
it's just
certainly
I've
can't
never,
answer that.
I
But
should
I,
have asked this
yeah.
in advance. I've just never seen this before, and I'm
Uh,
not sure how it came up in this direct way versus other times the city
Well, there
property.
certainly were attorneys involved in order to make this process happen. I really don't have much more information than that, but I trust that our comptroller does know the process or one of the processes for doing such a thing, and this is the mechanism that was used. And so I'm simply here asking on behalf of Bethlehem that they be awarded this particular parcel.
Before this moves out of the city, it would go to the Board of Estimate and Apportionment.
I'm not familiar with that, so I can't speak to that. And I don't think that the comptroller, she's not here and she has not sent a representative. Um,
Mr. Ray is online.
I'm sorry?
Is Mr. Ray speaking?
Oh, there, okay. Well, he may have better information.
Term quit claim deed is tripping me up a little bit. I've seen the city sell land. I've seen, different processes, but this was a little new to me. I'm not sure if you're acknowledging him. Or
So can we have, him
Up
to
to her.
speak to that?
Can you please state your name and your position with the comptroller's office, and then you can go ahead and speak.
I don't know why my name is Tom Ray. I'm an attorney with the firm Armstrong Teasdale, and I represent the comptroller's office. So to answer your question, in order to convey, this is a 19-foot by 127-foot lot in the middle of the block, 3,500 block of Closens, that was asked by the church to convey it to him for the reasons stated. We normally go through the process of asking for a value from the assessor's office, and we receive that. And the comptroller and the alderwoman discuss it and decide what they're going to charge. And then we get a title, a legal description. And it isn't a quitclaim deed because the city can't give anything other than a quitclaim deed. Otherwise, it would violate the Missouri Constitution, and that it will be a pledge of credit. So we always use a quitclaim deed.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you for the information, and I appreciate the time to ask questions.
Alderman
Okay,
Browning?
Hi, thank you. My question is simply just what does the church plan on doing with this property?
Well, this church, like I said, is involved in a lot of wraparound services in the community. They've had events on the lot in the past. That I'm sure that they have some future possible building that they may have on their purview, if they're able to raise funds to actually build. But they've been caring for the lot, and they have utilized the lot in the past.
I certainly appreciate them caring for the lot over the years. Those types of things, when gone unchecked, can have pretty negative effects on the surrounding communities. So we definitely appreciate that. I guess my only concern would be I'd hate to see it be used for like an impervious surface, like a parking lot. But as long as you can tell me it's not going to be parking, I'm fine with this.
To my knowledge, they have a pretty substantial parking lot, and we had not had a discussion about whether that would be a parking lot or not. I don't know if you are familiar with the community over there, but there is a lot of this in all of the churches with this in church at 3 o'clock. And so I really am very appreciative of all of the work that they have put into this.
Well, thank you. And yes, I know the NGA is just a few blocks east of there, and
Yeah.
we certainly hope that we can see fewer vacant lots in the future. We
Absolutely.
hope that we can continue to see progress in that area, but appreciate you bringing this forward and appreciate Mr. Ray for being here to answer questions as well. I have no more questions.
Alderman Aldridge?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You kind of took the words out of my mouth, Alderwoman Keys. I know exactly where the church sit that you're talking about.
Mhm.
And like you say, over there's a lot of vacant land, and really throughout Northside, people have been taking care of a lot of these different properties for decades. And I know the history and I know the reputation that the church has. So I'm hopeful, and I'm also very confident. I know whatever they're going to do with this is not only going to benefit the members, but also benefit the community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Sanye.
I don't have any questions. I just commend the church for, I think there's a lot of land in our city that is unattended to. And I attend a church that has wraparound services. I think those are really critical. So just kudos to them for caring for it, and kudos to you, Alderwoman, for making sure that they get the land that they've been stewarding.
Thank you.
All right, with that, Alderwoman Keys, you're recognized to close.
Well, thank you all again so much for being here this evening. So I would ask for a do pass recommendation on Board Bill number 59.
I move that we pass Board Bill 59 out with a do pass recommendation.
Second, previous row.
All right, hearing no objection. We're gonna say it was motion by Alderman Cone. We'll give it that tonight. And then it was seconded by Alderman Aldridge with the call for previous row with no objections. Congratulations, Alderwoman.
Thank you. And thanks, Ray, for the save. I appreciate you being here. All righty.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good night.
You too. Be safe. All right, now we will call up Vice Chair Sanye, recognized for Board Bill 114.
Okay. Happy Tuesday. I will start as soon as the chairwoman gives me the green light. Okay. Thank you. I just want to start, first of all, by just thanking everyone who's present in the room. It is a Tuesday evening. Any of us could be doing anything with our times. I know my colleagues have very busy schedules, and we usually have community meetings and events at this time. And everyone that's in this room has something, many things that we could be doing. So I just want to thank everyone for being present, because this is what democracy looks like, which is a great segue to our next slide, which is just an extension of the gratitude. Ooh. Okay. Again, this has been a collaboration. I think we've been having this conversation around this issue for about a year, but at least for the last, especially 6 months, for the specific bill that we're discussing, Board Bill 114, I really want to make sure I extend my gratitude to the zoning division. Mary Hartburn is here. She's done a great role into giving the history and the context of the zoning within our city. I also want to make sure that I thank the Planning and Urban Design Agency and Department. I know Miriam Keller is here as well. Again, has been a great partner, a great collaborator as well. The Building Division, Mr. Ware is not here, but of course those things are under the Building Division, and he also has been a great person who has given his insights. The Department of Human Services, Dr. Pearson, who really wanted to be here, is not able to be here, but that brings us to Casey Milberg, the Policy Director for the Mayor's Office, who is here, has something from him, in the President's Office, who has also been here. I really wanted to highlight these departments because I think that government is it's a very tricky thing. It's a very nuanced thing. Representing collectives and groups of people is difficult, but for hours and hours and hours and meetings and meetings and meetings, all of us have sat in rooms and had really tough, hard conversations with each other and really examined this entire system and tried to figure out, where are we, where can we go, and a path there. And so just want to make sure that I thank you all for giving me an example of what it looks like for a government to work together and for us to produce the legislation that's in front of us that I do believe will help to move us forward in the right direction. To start it, I just want to make sure we're clear on what this process for a special residential use looks like now. And one of the things that I think is really important for government is that we're very accessible and that people understand. So special residential use, in case someone is tuning in with us for the first time or is present with us for the first time, refers to, think of non-traditional housing. Many of the housing that doesn't have a lease or a mortgage, many times it is housing that is combined with social services. So you want to think of transitional housing, boarding homes, group homes, shelters, those types of housing. I just want to make sure we're grounded in what we're discussing. But they are indeed forms of housing that human beings do need, and they are classified under our code as special residential uses. And I think the easiest distinction is just kind of most housing that doesn't have a lease or mortgage. So right now, if you want to open any of these within the city of St. Louis, you would start with the apply and petition process. Again, assuming that we're all having this conversation for the first time and wanting all of us to just be on the same page, that is a process where you have to go within a 500-foot radius of the facility, and you have to collect signatures, and you have to give 51%, and you have to turn those into the zoning department. And so as of right now, that is your first step in the process. And then once you turn those signatures in, you automatically get rejected for a majority of these special residential uses because they are not allowed at all in our zoning code. And then once you get rejected because they're not allowed in our zoning code, you then go straight over to the appeals process. And so you would then file with an appeal with the Board of Public Service, and then you would have a public hearing. And at that public hearing, under the existing system, people could come and give their feedback and discuss the facility. But that's how this process works now. You do apply and petition, you get automatically rejected because none of these uses, they're either not allowed or extremely limited. And then you go straight to the appeals process and have a public hearing. And this bill specifically focuses on this part. So apply and petition is still in process, it's still in place, but we are addressing the fact that you get an automatic rejection and that you start at the appeals process. And we're doing that by proposing the idea of amending our zoning. And so just some key components of the Board Bill 114 that's in front of us. We are cleaning up parts of our zoning code by consolidating references. Many of my colleagues know that we have an overhaul of our zoning code. I know many of us have seen bills for zoning before, and so there's just kind of a lot of repeated terms. There's references to things that actually aren't covered under this chapter, and so we use this as an opportunity to clean up the code and make sure we're on the same page, and things that are not, that are duplicative or don't belong there are not any longer in the chapter. And then we've defined special residential uses and all forms of non-traditional housing that fall into this category, again, so that we're clear on what we're talking about when we discuss these facilities. Board Bill 114 also establishes site requirements for all non-traditional forms and sets density language to avoid concentration. So the site requirements are not anything that anybody in the crowd who goes to conditional use hearings right now is not familiar with, or that my colleagues are not familiar with. Almost every business that you see operating in the city has site requirements. You want to make sure these are essentially things that when you apply to go through this process, you have to speak to. And so in this bill, there's some specifics like around the parking, that it should be a maximum amount of parking spots for the staff, a maximum amount of staff per shift, but just very things that will be set per some of these facilities is one of the things the board sets. And then we also are creating operational plan requirements for shelters and transitional facilities. This is really one of the most important parts of this entire bill. Right now, the fact that we don't, as a city, have access to operational plans unless we are funding them, we're not able to ask them questions. So if this bill were to be passed, anyone who wanted to operate in the city of St. Louis who had to go through this process would have to submit an operational plan. And that's really critical for a lot of reasons. Number one, in order to have larger scale conversations, we need to have a good idea of kind of what is in place, what is operating. And so this will allow us to get that on the front end. And number two, the building division would really emphasize that for them to have enforcement around these facilities, we need something to hold them accountable to. And so operational plans that say, here's the population I'm serving, here's how long I anticipate their stays to be, here's the services that will be offered, here's how many, full-time staff I'll have, here's how much I'm relying on volunteers, will really be key, because should they be granted the right to operate, the building division will be using this operational plan as far as like what we can hold the provider accountable to. So just thinking of our system and where our system currently is right now, this is a map, and it includes the facilities that are publicly accessible online. I do want to flag for us that there are some special residential uses that you would not find online or in any public database for the safety of the folks there. And so if you're thinking of domestic violence shelters, if you're thinking of shelters that may serve folks who've been victims of sex trafficking and different things like that, you want to make sure their privacy is protected. But for those that are kind of publicly available, that we know they're in place, this is a little map. And I think the map is important because one of the things that the legislation has in it is concentration language. Anyone who kind of studies zoning, who knows the history of the city, we have certainly had a history of concentrating resources specifically for poor individuals and people of color communities. And I think that this map is a good demonstration of that, and also an idea of the 500 feet language and the density language in the bill, kind of why that's necessary, because I know there are some questions about, kind of why would that be needed, but it is important that we don't oversaturate these resources and that we do our best to spread them out. And then just another reflection of our system, the fact that these facilities are banned or extremely limited is really counter to what most people across the country refer to best practice, which is housing first. But in order for somebody to have access to a housing first model, they do need the housing to be available to them, which in our zoning code is currently banned or extremely. So just step one for this bill, I'm not going to go through all of this, but in case, again, if this is your first time and you're our special residential, I wanted to make sure we had them, very neatly and well in front of you all so that you can kind of see the different special residential uses and non-traditional housing that the bill refers to. And again, this is the biggest part that this bill is proposing is update to our zoning code. So these facilities will go from not allowed to conditionally permitted, which means that they will still have to go through the conditional use process. The notification will have to go up. They will have to have a public hearing. But that is a huge part of what the legislation in front of us is proposing. And then step 3 would be the operational plan. So I did just want to make sure we're all on the same page as far as like what is the information that is required on the front end, what is the information that every department in the city of St. Louis will have access to should this bill pass. And so we covered some of this earlier, but I did miss the non-discrimination policy. I didn't mention that piece. But we will just be asking for the applicant to clarify if they plan to serve everyone within their identified population or if they won't. And we're specifically with that language thinking of facilities who might want to pick and choose who they might serve. And so thinking of LGBTQ, gender identity, those things. And then the last thing that I really want to, that is here that I'll get into later is the affirmative statement of the operations plan, but I will explain that more in depth later on. Whoops. I think it died. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so this would be the process that Board Bill 114 proposes. We've kind of walked through this enough, so we can go to the next slide, but you would do your plat and petition. Your special residential use would be identified as far as which one you're trying to open. You would submit your plat and petition with your operational plan, and then you would get a conditional, if the zoning department would call and verify all of your signatures, and then they would give you a conditional use hearing date, and the notification would go up. So just to get ahead, I think now that this legislation has been in the public, it's been in the eye, I've gotten a chance to have some additional conversations with many residents across the city, many providers, many different business owners. And so I wanted to clarify some of a lot of the questions I've seen asked regularly, or misinformation that may be floating out there. So how does this legislation impact the plat and petition process currently required for all special residential uses, including shelters? The key point is just to know that there is no change under plat and petition at all. Anything that refers to plat and petition is under Chapter 25, and this bill is strictly Chapter 26. And so you will still have to do plat and petition in order to even initiate anything that this legislation proposes. You would have to do that first. How does this legislation impact regional planning efforts? Why not wait until after a regional plan has been created by area leaders? So I think this is a really important question, because I'm really excited that our city is having a regional conversation about how to deal with our unhoused and housing insecurity issue. And I think it's really necessary, and I really commend Dr. Pearson and Mayor Jones for really starting and leading this conversation. And both of the folks who have initiated that would also say that this legislation is made to be an aid to that process. There's no way to create a regional plan without being able to assess where you are. And right now, because we only have access to the facilities that we fund, and because we only have the means to have any enforcement mechanisms around them if any illegal activity happens, we actually do not necessarily have all of the data about what exists in our city, how it's operating, and how it will work. And so one of the great things about Board Bill 114, should it be passed, is that we will now have access to all of that vital information, the operations plan, and we will get that on the front end. We're making decisions about what should happen. And so this is just to say that this will help us to proactively regulate the facilities that are in place while we work on a larger plan, but also really help us to gather valuable data and to help the city to have the necessary information in order to continue these regional conversations. Which city department will approve the operational plan? That is a great question. One of the things that the legislation is very intentional about is making this operational plan available to any city department that requests it. I think when you think about the broad range of special residential uses, transitional housing, the different shelters, just all of the boarding homes, group homes, you really don't know which department might be of most interest. You might think it's Department of Human Services, and then it's actually the health department. You might think it's the health department, it's actually the building division. You might think it's the building division, it's actually the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. So this bill will make sure that any department that should take interest or that should be considered according to the operational plan and the services that will be offered and the population that will be served, that they will have access to it. And so to the specific question is, what is the Department of Human Services role in reviewing permit applications? There's no single department that is this is limited to, and it's really leaving the door open so that many of our departments who is likely that will be relevant to are able to collaborate and have their necessary conversations. Okay. And that really completes my presentation. So thank you all again. I hope to be as clear as possible. But before I move on, Alderman Aldridge, I'll walk around. I do have 2 amendments. Thank you. Just to bring in front of the committee that I would like to talk through and see if we can move forward with adopting them to the legislation in front of us for discussion. And so, we had a great hearing last week. All department folks were here. I've been in regular communication with colleagues, different community members about concerns. And so some things have been highlighted that we wanted to make sure we address and just make sure that this process continues to be transparent and collaborative and that the concerns are being addressed. And so Alderwoman, Chairwoman Hubbard, can I bring Amendment 1 in front of the committee for discussion?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And so Amendment 1, if you all watched last week's hearing, actually Alderwoman Schweitzer asked some really great questions that lifted up some concerns about, okay, well, the providers will go into the community, they will do plat and petition, and how will we be sure that that information that they might be, talking about or conversation, how will we make sure that the operational plan is really accurate and up to date and that we're all getting the same information, which I think is really important and was a valid point. And so Amendment 1 that's in front of you all adds a section to the operational plan that would add the requirement of an affirmative statement that the information the applicant is submitting in the operations plan is an accurate representation of planned operations. And so they would have to sign this. And just to make sure, again, we want to make sure we're all getting the same information. I would say to any, obviously, being dishonest or misrepresenting what you plan to do is not good for any of us. And the goal of this process is to create something that's truly community-centered. And so I am proposing this amendment for discussion and adoption.
Right. What I'll do is see if any of our colleagues have any questions. I just sent them to Alderman Cone and see if anyone has any questions on Amendment Number 1. Okay. Alderwoman Schweitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, Alderwoman, for doing this. Just for kind of the process clarification. So the idea is that they're affirming in the affirmative statement that this is the operations they presented and got signatures on in the Latin petition.
Correct.
So, okay, so that making sure that, whatever is agreed to by the neighborhood or 51, over 50% of the neighborhood as an operations plan is what's going in front of the, it's what's going in front of the committee.
Correct.
Yes, okay. Thank you.
Alderman Cone or Alderman Browning, do you all have any questions on Amendment Number 1? All right. With that, I'll accept the motion that we adopt Amendment Number 1 to Board Bill 114.
I make the motion that we adopt Amendment Number 1 to Board Bill 114.
Second.
It was moved by Alderman Aldridge and seconded by Alderwoman Schweitzer that we adopt Amendment Number 1 to Board Bill 114. All in favor?
Previous roll.
Oh, great. Previous roll. Hearing no objection, we've adopted Amendment Number 1.
Thank you. And Chairwoman, can I have your permission to bring Amendment 2 in front of the committee for discussion and adoption?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So Amendment 2, last time Alderman Browning really asked some questions that I think we wanted to make sure that it was clear what the intention of the legislation is. Anything that is currently in place, we fully intend for it to be grandfathered in, and the legislation even has 6 months before it takes place so that we can have time to transition and that the departments can have time to be ready to implement this. And so this is really some clarification language that says that one occupant with a business license may expand their operation to another parcel within a 500-foot radius through a conditional use permit. And so this is saying that once you do your plat and petition process, if you are moving within that radius, you do not have to redo your plat and petition process because you've already completed the signatures. And so many wards have existing facilities. If that existing facility was to want to move, so long as they're within that same radius, we want to make sure they're clear that they do not have to repeat the plat and petition process.
All right. Alderman Browning or Alderman Cone, do you all have any questions? Alderwoman Schweitzer, any questions? Amendment? All right, with that,
yeah.
oh, okay. Alderman Browning?
Just one clarifying question. So when it says one occupant, how is an occupant defined?
It would depend on the application, but usually that would be where the name of special residential use would be.
Okay, so this addresses my concern about current operators that are in good standing with the city who would like to open a facility, say, next door to their current facility. They would be able to do so without having to go through the entire process again.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I will accept the motion that we adopt To Board Bill 114.
I'd like to make a motion that we adopt amendment number 2 to Board Bill 114.
Second.
Previous row.
Okay. Hearing no objections to previous row, we have adopted amendment number 2 to Board Bill 114. So now we have Board Bill 114 as amended before us. I'm sorry, Vice Chair Sanya, you can move forward.
Thank you, Chairwoman. And with that, Director Milberg will be coming up. Dr. Pearson was not able to make it this evening. He has something come up with his family, but certainly we've remained to be very communicative with him. And so I know that we had a lot of questions at our last hearing and even in email communications. I know many of my colleagues, you've sent me many of my colleagues, you've sent me legislation, you've sent me emails that your constituents have sent to you, and I've kind of responded to them. But I think it's very important that we provide as much clarity on the record. And so I heard a lot of questions around data. You know, where is the city right now in terms of these services that are being offered? Dr. Pearson, I think, is the best person to speak to that. And so even though he was unable to make it this evening, he's given Director Milberg a statement or a letter, if you will, to speak to the questions that I sent to him saying that these came up. Would you mind addressing these concerns?
Thank you. Director Milberg. Thank you.
All right, good evening. For the record, my name is Casey Milberg, and I'm the Policy Director in Mayor Jones's office. Oh, yes, you can. Unfortunately, Director Pearson is unable to be here tonight, but yes, he did ask me to read aloud the following statement, letter that he submitted. A virtual copy will be shared with the clerk's office as well for anybody watching or here tonight who would like to access a copy of it. It is a little bit lengthy because it's responsive to some questions and requests for information that were brought forward last week. This includes the intersectionality of the housing summit that was held last week with this legislation. It includes some data requests. For example, what do we know about how large our unhoused population is, how many emergency beds the city funds, things like that. DHS's involvement with this legislation and views on it, and then some other info for context as well. So I'll go ahead and get started. Dear members of the Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee, there's a conflict that prevents me from attending the hearing. I want to offer the following points. Last week, I worked closely with the East-West Gateway Council of Governments, Greater St. Louis, Inc., and House Everyone STL to convene a regional housing summit that pulled together all of the continuum of cares of the greater metropolitan region, multiple housing authorities, service providers, and elected officials to talk about how to create and support a regional plan for the unhoused. We will have a community share out for what we discussed, but I did want to highlight a critical aspect of what that plan will create: an emergency rehousing system that is responsive to the needs of the community members who are the unhoused. The goal is to create more long-term housing with the idea that we can build capacity in the community with landlords and property managers who want to collaborate with providers. We understand that not everyone will be immediately placed in permanent housing in the community, and so in the interim, it would be good to know that shelters and other SRU housing are able to meet the needs of people who are getting ready for this rehousing process. DHS funds 314 emergency beds in the community, many of whom have several layers of city and state funding attached to them, including the St. Louis Affordable Housing Trust Fund and the Missouri Housing Trust Fund. DHS funds emergency shelters out of the Emergency Solutions Grant and ARPA funds. Writ large, we have a shortage of affordable housing in the community and not enough vouchers to go around. Looking at the coordinated entry list, the standardized tool that assesses and screens unhoused individuals to prepare them for housing, the average time spent unhoused waiting for community housing is 776 days. The average time that someone on the list spends in emergency shelter prior to community housing is 242 days. There are over 1,200 people that we have counted in the yearly point in time count that are living in shelters, transitional housing, and on the streets, and we owe it to them to create a coordinated system that keeps them safe. We need to build a better system to drive these numbers down significantly. But we also know that last month we saw, on average, over 400 turnaways from emergency shelter. So while shelters are not the preferred housing option for people at risk of homelessness and people experiencing homelessness, having a bed helps when the alternative is no bed, especially in inclement weather. DHS worked early on with Alderwoman Sanier in helping to craft this legislation. The operational plan that a provider would have to submit could assist the building division in assessing the context by which a facility would be used. At minimum, it would assist in helping to understand how the services offered would fit into the overall landscape of the eventual regional plan. I would be remiss in not offering the following. I support any zoning changes made that could enable long-term housing to be built in a more equitable manner that could free up the logjam of people accessing housing. And any ability for the City of St. Louis to be made aware of the shelter operations via the operations plan would be a benefit. We received a question a while back on ensuring that shelter spaces are equitable for the LGBTQIA+ population. DHS has a standing memorandum of understanding with the Trans Housing Initiative of St. Louis to educate providers on compliance and non-discrimination when it comes to issues related to gender and sexuality. We stand by that MOU and we urge providers to attend any THISL-led training in this area. There has been a lot of give and take in this process, and I'm looking forward to continuing the work with Alderwoman Sanier and the Board of Aldermen to support legislative strategy in concert with the regional plan. Sincerely, Adam Cicero Pearson, Director, Department of Human Services.
All right, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for reading it in its entirety to be captured here for the record. Does anyone have any questions about the statement? Okay, Alderman Aldridge.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I would just hope that, Alderwoman, you put this in the record in the drive so we can have it. You know, I think a lot of times when we work on legislation, and I know that you have worked with all the stakeholders from the mayor's office to the president's office to the experts, DHS, that, you know, during the winter times, I remember, we won't go back, but when we was out there advocating for the unhoused, but DHS is the operating body within Louis that you know, have the specialty to make sure that our unhoused is being treated fairly. And also, I see zoning over in the corner, and I know you worked with them on this legislation. So I just think this letter is very powerful that you have the director of DHS saying he supports any zoning measures when it comes to this, on top of having the zoning board that have also worked with you on this. So we just hope that this go into the record so it could be shared amongst all our colleagues.
All right, any other questions? Okay, I want to make sure Alderman Browning doesn't have anything, and then I would also like to reference out of respect first, out of an apology for parking in his spot, but I do want to make sure that we know that our colleague from the second ward, Alderman Oldenburg, is here, and I just want to make sure he was okay and didn't have any questions. So we'll move forward then. If you want to go to, did you have any other comments, Vice Chair Sanier, or do you want to move to public comment?
Nope, I'm open to public comment. Any final questions, however you want to do it.
Perfect. Okay, there may have been some people that came in after we swore in and signed in, so make sure you do that in the interim. And we'll work, if you haven't, I see a few people up, and there might be some online as well. We'll just keep a track of that. There's no additional ones online. And how we'll do it, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and we'll have Madam Clerk will alternate in support or non-support or no mutual. We'll alternate them. And then we'll move forward like that so that we keep it alternating. and also try to move forward with the people online as well as the people in the room. So when you come up, just, can everybody that didn't raise their hand at first time, I think I saw maybe 3 people, can you raise your hand? And swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Absolutely, thank you.
There's one person on the line who needs to turn her camera on and be sworn in.
And then when you come up, okay, you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you so much. And when you come up, you can just state your name, the ward you reside in, the city, or if not, and then just go forward with your comments. We look forward to hearing from you. So, Madam Clerk.
Our first speaker is Alex Hampton. In support, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Alex Hampton. I'm from Ward 14. As a formerly unhoused person, I would like to put forth my immediate, unequivocal support for this bill because.
Can you bring the mic down?
I'll just hold it, I'm short. As stated by many other people tonight, there needs to be concrete ways for unhoused people to get their help that they need. I was made unhoused when I was 17 years old. There are not very many resources for unhoused minors. I had a very difficult time trying to get the help and support that I needed. Thank goodness I did, and I'm good now. We need networks of support, not patchworks, to make sure that everybody gets the help and support that they need. Everybody needs housing. Housing is a human right. We cannot live without housing. So we need networks of supports that will support everyone, including LGBT people. I'm a part of that community, which hindered my help in getting housing when I needed it back in 2020. So hopefully, moving forward, we can have better support for everybody in the city of St. Louis, and I'm looking forward to this bill being passed. Thank you.
I like that network, not patchwork.
The next speaker is Kayla O'Shorn. In opposition, we have Father Mitchell Boyden in support.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here and having us speak. I'm Father Mitch Doyen, pastor of St. Josephine Bakita Catholic Parish, a proud resident of the 14th Ward, and Rasheen Aldridge is taking great care of us. Our parish comprises 3 churches, St. Nicholas, Most Holy Trinity, and Saints Teresa and Bridget. I'm here to offer testimony in support of Board Bill 114, Alderwoman Saunier's proposed legislation regarding special residential uses. This legislation addresses the city's need for transition. Study after study after study have demonstrated that housing first is the remedy for much of what ails all of us, including our economy. Board Bill 114 provides a solution for meeting an urgent need while still including appropriate safeguards and consultation with the community. This is a win for our brothers and sisters in need of housing. It's a win for the neighborhoods they call home, and it's a win for our St. Louis community. Lazarus is at our door. We can no longer walk past our neighbors in need, hoping someone else will help them. We can act now to extend mercy and compassion, all the while making our community safer and vibrant for everyone. I urge this legislative body to pass Board Bill 114 by addressing the current prohibition on special residential uses, providing clearer regulations, and ensuring quality care. We can create a more equitable and inclusive community for all. Thank you.
One of our online speakers is Inez Bordeaux. If you could turn your camera mic on. Okay, so we're going to Thomas Krasinko.
Hi, everyone. I'm Thomas Kristenko, and I'm a resident in Ward 10. I wanted to come out in support of the bill just because I think that, it's a sensible bill. It doesn't really do too much to, radically change anything. It doesn't change the plan petition process, but it's going to be a really big step in order to help solve the unhoused crisis that we have here in the city. I mean, you heard from the statement earlier that there just aren't enough beds. There aren't enough beds for people who urgently need it, and this will be a big help for those people who are looking for housing in some of the worst moments of their life. And one thing that I just wanted to highlight is the idea that who this bill benefits is way more than who we think of traditionally as the unhoused community, just because there are so many people who are on the edge and wouldn't even realize it. I mediate in housing court out in the county, and what I've seen is that something as simple as a car accident, and suddenly you have to pay for your car and your medical bills. You have to miss work. That could send someone who would never even consider that they would be unhoused anytime soon, and they could send them into needing something urgently. Something as simple as a family situation breaking down. Maybe there's violence in the home and you need to get out urgently. Finding housing instantly, especially for people who may not have the means to do so, is nearly impossible, especially in those situations, again, where people are sent to be unhoused because they're going through likely some of the worst things that they're going through in their life. And I think that the city is taking this step here to be able to support those people, to be able to give them the housing that they need while still keeping the people involved in the process. So I just wanted to point out sort of that this bill really helps more than what you would traditionally think. And I think that the conversations around the unhoused need to be, sort of factor in the fact that anything could happen to people, and when that happens and we're going through some of the worst things that could possibly happen to someone, the city should be there to be able to provide housing for those people, so that way they can cross one of those big concerns off their list. Thank you.
Our next speaker is George Putney, in support.
I'd like to extend a thank you to the committee members for hearing my testimony. My name is George Putney, and I currently reside in Richmond Heights, but I'm planning to move into Ward 4 in the Dogtown neighborhood within the year. I also work in the city of St. Louis, and I'm here tonight in support of Alderwoman Saulnier's Bill 114. I work in the reentry field, assisting formerly incarcerated individuals as they return to the St. Louis community. And formerly incarcerated individuals can currently be found in every ward in the city. However, there is a lack of transitional housing for these returning citizens. This creates a vicious cycle for some of these individuals that results in homelessness and a return to criminal activity. Transitional housing providers currently prevent this scenario from occurring. Along with transitional housing, these existing service providers offer wraparound services such as mental health counseling, job assistance, financial literacy courses, and substance use disorder therapy. This approach reduces the recidivism rate by over 50%. So established nonprofits are already providing these services, and they're prepared to offer more of these services with the passage of this bill. I'd like to give an example of where we're going to need more transitional housing. A recent change in Missouri law now allows women that give birth while incarcerated to retain custody and bond with their infants. The physical nursery that is going to be provided as part of this nursery program in the Department of Corrections is being completed at the women's prison in Vandalia by the end of the year. So that means the first releases of these women and their infants will occur later next year. So we've got to be prepared for that. Upon release, many of these women and children will need transitional housing as well as child care services. There are existing service care providers who are willing to step up and provide these needed services. I'm sure the last thing that any of us want is to have this most vulnerable population run the risk of being unhoused. This bill provides an important step toward ensuring that this does not happen. It also provides a more predictable and transparent framework that allows the reentry providers to plan in conjunction with the city agencies. The framework also would continue to allow neighbors of planned traditional housing to have significant input throughout the process. Another
Excuse me, Mr.
benefit of this
Putney,
bill.
that's your time.
Oh, time? Okay, let me just finish. Another benefit of the bill would be to help reduce the crime rate by allowing consideration of transitional housing that is proven to reduce recidivism. Finally, while there's no guarantee that any single transitional housing facility will be approved, this potential legislation will provide hope for the formerly incarcerated, as well as safer neighborhoods for the people of St. Louis. I ask each of you for approval in passing this bill. Thank you.
We have Kevin Strauss online.
Hi. Board Bill 114 is a huge endeavor of taking action and responsibility regarding the zoning of special residential housing. It's a monumental task for the city government to ensure that the most vulnerable community members have their needs met while protecting existing neighbors and neighborhoods. Some of my questions that I have is I just heard about the departments that would have could request an operational plan. My question for that is, who is ultimately vetting those operational plans? And who will ultimately be responsible for the operation, the clients and the neighborhoods or neighbors if issues arise? And my other question is, will that operational plan be made public? And if so, how? My other questions that I have regarding zoning is why a blanketed approach to using conditional uses for all zones A through L? No other city has this type of zoning as presented by planning and urban design. My other question is, I have it in every single, even single and two-family zones and industrial zones. I'm not sure if this was intentional or if it was a copy-paste error. Also, specifics within the document. It states facilities may or may not offer support services such as counseling, vocational training, and pathways to permanent housing for clients. Is this correct? Providing the shelter in a neighborhood with no support services, is that responsible and safe? Who is required to get services and who is not getting them? Page 10 addresses regulations are intended to provide reasonable restrictions within districts so these uses do not compromise the health, safety, and general welfare of persons in the district or other uses allowed in each district. My question is, who defines reasonable? Reasonable is subjective to the district and the culture of the neighborhood. Under conditional use issues, questions I have, again, it goes back to who will be monitoring and enforcing conditional uses. And if infractions are made, who is going to enforce the revocation of a permit? Again, this is a monumental task to ensure the safety and well-being of both the most vulnerable population and existing people in neighborhoods. We can't afford a do-over or to work it out as it goes along. There is simply too much at stake if things go wrong because of the details not being worked out beforehand. If you pass Board 114, I assume that everyone will be taking responsibility for it. I oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Strauss, and thank you for those great questions. I'm sure the sponsor will be able to directly respond to those in her remarks. Did you mind mentioning what ward you reside in?
I am in Ward 5.
Okay, thank you so much, and thank you again for being here.
We have Malik Lindo, Ward 7.
Hi, can y'all hear me? Perfect. My name is Malik. I live in Ward 7. I'm a homeowner in Ward 7 now. And I believe that I would rather see shelters in my community than unhoused people dying on the street. So I personally think it's better for everyone involved. I feel like people who complain about shelters existing will complain about unhoused people existing. But I think we need to balance what we really need or understand what we really need is people in houses. So that's more important than your complaints about unhoused people existing. I've shared before with y'all that I've been had issues with housing insecurity. I'm not going to get in my feelings and get into that right now. But I think a lot of people who you might not know have gone through housing insecurity and they deserve to live and have safety. And there might be some thoughts people have about unhoused people, and they just need to check their ignorance about what different people face and where people are coming from. There's people who might be unhoused because they come from abusive families. There might be people who become unhoused because of domestic abuse in their relationships. There's all sorts of reasons you can become unhoused. So there might be a lot of thoughts and stereotypes regarding people on drugs or people who are violent and all this. And that's not the case. I don't think I'm a violent person, but here I am, and I've been struggling with housing in the past, but now I'm not, and now I'm a homeowner. So I think if we can have more housing options to make it easier so people don't have to struggle and they can get to a point where they could be like me, they could be a homeowner. I'm sure there's other homeowners over here as well. We can really make sure we have more people succeeding in our city, and that's what I really want. I want to see this legislation pass, and I hope more is to come to help make sure we can address unhoused issues in the city. So thank you for all the work y'all doing.
Thank you, and congratulations on your blessing.
We have Donna Agag online.
Wow, you all are moving quickly.
Alderwoman,
My
she
name
needs
is
to be
Donna.
sworn in. She needs to be sworn
My
in.
name
She
is
wasn't
Donna.
sworn in the first. Okay.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Donna Aga. I live in Ward 5. I thank you for the amendments that were presented. Our city has a need for diverse housing solutions, particularly for transient populations. That's undeniable. I'm not up here to say that's not a problem, because it is. Many individuals require case management support to address complex needs, and I fully recognize the importance of finding effective solutions. However, this bill raises concerns about potential unintended consequences on residential protections. Single-family Zone A and two-family Zone B districts are essential for preserving neighborhood character, controlling density to prevent overcrowding, reducing noise and traffic from commercial uses, and maintaining predictable property values. Altering these protections could disrupt the stability these residential zones provide. This bill draws on studies from 6 cities, yet only Portland permits these uses in residential areas. The rationale for selecting Portland as a model isn't clear, especially considering its recent struggles with homelessness. I strongly encourage a careful examination of the reasons behind this choice, as the other cities' decisions to preserve residential zoning offer valuable perspectives. Additionally, we're told that community feedback supports the inclusion of special residential uses across all districts, but have constituents truly understood the broader impact on residential protections? Community input should be analyzed thoroughly to ensure it reflects informed perspectives rather than assumptions. Neighborhoods like mine include single-family and two-family homes alongside multifamily and commercial zones, each with distinct boundaries. If the city plans to modify these residential zoning protections, It should present compelling data to justify the changes, including past needs and future projections. I've only heard very small numbers. I haven't heard giant numbers that would mean that we would impact all of our single family and two family residential districts. Is the need so overpowering that these districts have to be used? What specific data supports the necessity of these changes? While addressing housing needs is critical, it's important to protect the safety and well-being of our existing communities. Safeguarding our children, elderly, and other vulnerable individuals is just as vital as addressing the needs of transient populations. Who will ensure community safety and cohesion are proactively managed in a balanced way? This bill seems to take a reactive stance. I urge the city to consider a proactive approach, perhaps by involving neighborhood managers or drafting good neighbor agreements to outline clear expectations. In closing, I respectfully request that these gaps in the bill are addressed to ensure a balanced approach that serves everyone's best interests. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Teresa. I can't pronounce the last name.
Can you hear me if I leave it here? Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Terry Winning-Very, and I'm a resident of Richmond Heights, but I've worked as a registered nurse in the city of St. Louis for most of my professional life. I am here today to express my support for Board Bill 114 regarding special residential uses. The amendment's passage is critical to creating a more equitable and inclusive St. Louis community by addressing problems in our current zoning laws. First, it's important to note that existing regulations treat SRUs in some SRUs allowed in certain zoning districts, while other, like homeless shelters, are entirely prohibited. Under current regulations, to pursue development of non-traditional housing options like temporary shelter or transitional housing, additional steps of appeal and approval of variance are required. Why does this matter? This creates substantial barriers to the development of vital housing options and contributes to a significant shortfall of shelter beds. In my role as community health nurse serving youth enrolled in Medicaid and their families, I'm aware that many of our clients live paycheck to paycheck and pay an outsized portion of their monthly income towards housing. Our clients are vulnerable to becoming unhoused. When a housing crisis inevitably occurs, all too often there is no place to go. Our existing shelters are often operating at capacity, leaving many people without a safe place to stay. As a result, I've observed mothers with children sleeping in cars. I've witnessed families split between friends and relatives who can accommodate only a portion of its members. I've watched teens remain in unsafe home environments or couch surf because they could not find shelter. In fact, it is not uncommon for St. Louis youth to cross the Missouri River just to find an open bed. The current bill will reduce barriers to the creation of new housing resources by establishing clear regulations and streamlining the approval process. One of the most important changes outlined in the amendment is the requirement for a conditional use permit for all SRUs. This change does not hinder the establishment of these facilities, but rather provides a structured process that ensures proper oversight. Many individuals who would benefit from temporary shelter or other supported housing arrangements are facing challenges including job loss, mental and physical health issues, and the impacts of social and economic marginalization. By requiring housing providers to submit detailed operations plans, assurances are provided that these facilities are prepared to meet the needs of future residents. Importantly, the proposed amendment respects community concern that SRUs may be preferentially placed in communities already coping with high levels of poverty. This fear is addressed head-on by provisions that limit the density of SRUs per city block. Board Bill 114 ensures that local voices remain an integral part of SRU development. The proposed zoning amendment for SRUs represents a substantial step forward in making our city a more inclusive and equitable place. By streamlining the approval process, enhancing oversight, and respecting community concerns, the city is better positioned to serve all residents, especially those in need. All St. Louisans will rest easier when it is certain that vulnerable people, whether elderly or chronically ill, immigrant or low-wage worker, and certainly every child has a place to sleep at night. I urge the committee to support the amendment for just an equitable future. Thank you for your time.
Jeremy Rambus online.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay? Let's see if I can get the video up. Here we go. Hi, my name is Jeremy Ravis. I actually spoke at the last hearing, I think, with the Board of Commissioners. I am speaking in support of this bill. I am a member of Red Bike Outreach, as I've mentioned before, and we do street outreach with the unhoused most Mondays. And the need is clear to see. The need is clear to see. There are people who are grateful to see us arrive with food and clothing and supplies and things like that. And it also underlines the fact that there is not enough shelter in this city. I just learned that this city has a motto. The motto of the city is justifiably proud. I just learned this today. And I was thinking about like another motto that we could have as well, the city that collaborates. And this bill is a reflection of that exact sentiment. This could be a city that collaborates to help the, most vulnerable among us. And the process that is outlined in Alderman Sonny's bill is exactly what's needed for community input and to be able to craft the kinds of shelters that meet these needs, the kind of transitional housing that meet the needs of returning people to housing and safety. And I support an endeavor that helps us as citizens and legislators in this city to collaborate on just creating a better life for its citizens. And like I said, the need is clear to see. And I support and would gladly see this bill pass. And, a lot of folks spoke in opposition. This is a perfect bill for them to weigh in and be part of the process as well for their own neighborhoods. And I should have mentioned that I'm from the 4th Ward. I live in Dogtown. That's all I had to say today, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak. Thank you so much.
Iris Etchison in support.
Hello, my name is Iris Etchison. I am here in support of Bill 114. This is my first time publicly speaking, especially at an event like this. I was previously homeless, and homeless shelters have got me where I am today. The caseworkers, the healthcare workers, they've gotten me to where I am today. I had to leave my home to finish high school, and in that I was shelter hopping. There was always almost no beds. It was very hard to find beds. I did couch surf a few times because of the need of beds, but for the most part, I did keep myself off the streets because I'm very good at navigating this field. So good that I'm going into the field of social work. I would love to see this bill passed because there is such a great need for beds, for homeless shelters, for people who help people who are in need. So, yeah, with that, thank you. I also don't know what zone I'm in, but I live in Tower Grove South. So, thank you so much.
Thank you, Iris. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for telling your story, especially mentioning that it was your first time. It is kind of big, when somebody does it for their first time. Thank you for being closest to the problem, which means you are closest to the solution and not wanting to give back and get back and make sure that people can have a better experience rather than you might have had. We appreciate that.
We have Molly Metzger.
Good evening. My name is Molly Metzger. I'm a resident of the 7th, here to speak in support of Board Bill 114. I mostly want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to my alderwomen in the 7th and other elected officials, past and present, who have been working on solutions for some years now, and especially to the public servants in planning and urban design and the other city agencies who have been part of, as a previous speaker said, the significant collaboration behind this bill. And I also want to say special thanks to everyone who's testifying for the first time and being part of solutions. This is a scary time in our democracy, to zoom out a little bit. It's understandable that many of us are feeling anxious or even hopeless. But as Miriam Kaba says, hope is a discipline. It's not something that we can find, that we can happen upon. It's something that we must build together. So thank you to everyone who has shown up to the democratic process in good faith to figure out real solutions to homelessness, a problem that should not exist. It gives me some hope. Thank you.
Inez Bordeaux online. David Bauer.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I'm at my nursing job tonight, so I had to run from a patient's room. Hi, my name is Inez Bordeaux. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the 3rd Ward. I am, excuse me, the committee woman for the 3rd Ward, and I'm showing up today in enthusiastic support for Board Bill 114. So many things. Housing is so important. Families are the building blocks of societies, and a home is the fundamental building block of a family. And until all of our unhoused neighbors are housed, our communities are not going to be as safe, as prosperous, and as vibrant as we want them to be. I've listened to a lot of not in my backyard talk today, and it's time for all of us to admit that our unhoused neighbors are our neighbors. And when our neighbors need a hand up, it is our job to do that. And I think Board Bill 114 is going to make it easier to bring shelters, for all manner of folks that need assistance to our neighborhoods. As the 3rd Ward Committee woman, I have long been on the record of being supportive of shelters and homeless shelters and intentional encampments in the ward, and there are many people in my ward who feel the same way. We want to see these things in our neighborhoods because we recognize that unhoused peoples are our neighbors and are deserving of our love, our care, and our support. I am also a person that's been directly impacted by this issue. In 2009, when I was fleeing domestic violence with my 4 children, there was nowhere for me to go. There were no shelter beds for me and my children. There was nowhere for a person who was fleeing domestic violence to go. And that is unconscionable. When I became unhoused in 2011, like, there were no shelter beds. There was nowhere for me to go. And so, like, this is an issue that's very near and very dear to my heart. And I just want to thank Alderwoman Sanye for continuing to keep her foot on the necks of the Board of Aldermen and the citizens of the city so we can get this done. Honestly, y'all, Board Bill 114 is the bare minimum. Like, it is literally the bare minimum. The bar is on the floor. All you have to do is step over it. I fully expect to see a unanimous vote to pass this bill out of committee. Let's get this done. We are a blue city. We have many people on this committee who call themselves progressive. This is an easy layup, y'all. Let's get this done for our neighbors, for our friends, for our coworkers, for the working poor and people that are trying to figure out, like, how they're going to make it to the next day. So let's make it a step easier by making sure that they have a safe and warm and comfortable place to lay their head at night with their children, with their loved ones, regardless of if they are LGBTQIA or not, regardless of their gender identity. Let's get this done for the people of St. Louis. And that's it. Thank you.
David Bauer in support.
Good evening. I'm Brother David. I'm part of the Franciscan community that's lived for 160 years in Dutchtown. And we're followers of St. Francis. And as was mentioned, one of the mottos for St. Louis is to work together for other people. And St. Louis himself, St. Louis King of France, who was a Franciscan, he was known for
Excuse me, could you speak in the mic, please?
He was known for his love for the poor, even though he lived several hundred years ago. But he was following the way of St. Francis, who lived 800 years ago. And he not only served the poor and wanted to be with the poor, but he wanted to serve the outcast of his day and bring him into the larger community. And I think all these efforts there would benefit from this Bill 114 to help those who want to help other people to do that work. And so I think it'll be a great asset, and I ask for your support.
Raymond Redlich. Redlich. Hannah Frazier.
Hello, my name is Hannah Fraser. I live in Ward 10, and I'm here in support of the board bill. I worked with the St. Louis City Continuum of Care, which is a coalition of homeless service providers, for about 1.5 years, and sitting in several meetings every week with shelter providers, homeless service providers, behavioral health providers, other people who care about unhoused people. The one question that came up in every meeting is, how are we going to get people off the street if we don't have any beds? And Dr. Pearson mentioned that in September there were over 400 turnaways. There's a tracking system that shelters use every time they have to tell somebody there's no bed for you. And it was 422 in September. That's 422 times that a case manager or intake specialist had to tell someone, on probably the worst day of their lives, you can't stay here. And this also includes people who were told, not today, but maybe try again tomorrow. And maybe they came back with a glimmer of hope that there would be a bed, and once again were told there is not. These people might have had to sleep outside. They might have had to go back to toxic or even violent living situations. Or they might have done whatever it took to get enough money to get a hotel room for that night, even if it was dangerous. We need more places for people to go. And this bill provides that opportunity, along with the operational plan, the rules, regulations, protections, and opportunity for community input. I urge you to support this bill for the people of St. Louis, and thank you.
Simone Covington in support.
Hello, my name is Simone Covington, and I am a resident of the 6th Ward. I'm here today to testify in support of Bill 114. My community is full of unhoused individuals who are exposed to extremely cold weather year after year with nowhere warm to go during the night hours. I've worked as a practicum student at the St. Patrick's Inn, and I have seen individuals with frostbitten limbs, some who have had to endure amputation, and I have heard of outreach providers finding limbs or parts of limbs on the streets of St. Louis. Homeless shelters are currently banned in every zone according to the zoning codes in St. Louis City. Zoning laws treat SRUs inconsistently. This amendment would provide a more predictable and transparent framework for SRUs. This Bill 114 doesn't change anything with existing plat and petition processes, as it focuses as it focuses solely on zoning codes. This bill deconcentrates poverty by limiting the number of SRUs to no more than 2 on a single city block. City funding for homeless shelters has decreased by 80% since last year, even though funding was already inadequate. Furthermore, 2 unhoused individuals died last year due to a lack of shelter beds. One was sleeping right outside of a shelter. I want to say thank you to Alderwoman Sanier for sponsoring this bill. Thank you in advance for any alderperson who will co-sponsor. And thank you for your yes votes now and in the full board meeting.
Carolyn McDonald in support.
Hi, my name is Carolyn McDonald, and I'm a resident of Ward 4, and I'm here today to testify in support of Board Bill 114. I stand before you as one of many St. Louis residents who support more humane and sustainable solutions to the housing crisis in this city. The need for non-traditional housing options in the city is immediate and it's urgent. This is an issue that affects individuals, children, families. It's an issue that affects people in this room, as many people have bravely shared their stories with you all today. It's not an us and them issue. It's a we issue. It's our issue. And it's our responsibility to seek solutions that address housing, insecurity, and safety in this city. We all know that St. Louis has a long history of discriminatory housing policies, redlining, and racial covenants that continue to shape the city to this day. What we are seeing on the streets of St. Louis is a direct result of these historical injustices. The inconsistent and unequal approach to special residential uses, which house vital social services, is allowing this inequitable treatment to continue. Our houseless neighbors deserve shelter. They deserve a place to seek respite from the cold, a safe bed to rest in, and a resource to help them get back on their feet when they need it the most. They deserve better than being placed on endless 211 hold lines, of being denied at shelter doors, being faced with years-long waiting lists, and being left, as has happened every winter in the city, to die from exposure to the elements. What we're talking about today is not just a matter of changing zoning laws. It is about protecting lives. It is about not excluding our neighbors, our community members, from the bare minimum standard of humanity and dignity. Board Bill 114 addresses current zoning prohibitions that keep our shelters inaccessible, that deny services to those who need it the most, and that reinforces unjust and discriminatory practices that have defined the city's past, and if we're not careful, will define its future. I urge you to pass Board Bill 114 because it will more clearly define special residential uses, provide greater transparency and oversight, ensure quality care, and help deconcentrate poverty while protecting existing facilities. I urge you to pass Board Bill 114 because it will save lives. I urge you to pass Board Bill 114 because it is the right thing to do for the city and for its community. Thank you for your time.
Hannah Clemens in support.
Hello, my name is Hannah Clemens and I'm a resident of Ward 7. Thank you, Alderwoman Saunier, for putting this bill forward. I support Board Bill 114 because I work at Youth in Need and spend each day helping homeless and unstably housed youth find emergency shelter and long. People will often ask me what's the hardest part of working with homeless youth, and the hardest part is also one of the most parts, which is telling a young person that there is nowhere for them to go. There are 3 youth shelters in the St. Louis area and only 1 in St. Louis City. There are not nearly enough beds for all of the youth that need shelter on any given night. And often when there is a bed available in St. Louis County, a youth is forced to turn it down because they lack transportation and will be disconnected from their job, family, or other social. The only shelter in the city is always full and it has a long wait list. The result is that when a young person in St. Louis City gets put out, evicted, or runs away from an abusive situation at home, they are often forced to double up or sleep on the streets. When a youth or any person does not have a safe and stable place to sleep, they cannot be successful in any other part of their life. If we expect our young people to become mature, productive, contributing members of our community, we have a responsibility to set them up for success. Board Bill 114 would lift a discriminatory ban that has left too many people without housing opportunities for too long. I urge you to pass Board Bill 114 and allow St. Louis to move a small step closer to the equitable and inclusive community that we know it can be. Thank you.
KB Doman. In support.
Hello, my name is KB Doman. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm an attorney with Arch City Defenders. I also do weekly outreach and have for about 7 years. I'm actually here tonight with a group of folks that are about to go directly out and distribute food supplies to people in our community. Tonight, like every night that we go out, people repeatedly ask if we know of any available shelter, and we will repeatedly say no. There's currently no shelter available in St. Louis City for single individuals, couples, and families with boys over 12 years old. This is not rare for our city. Full shelters forcing people to sleep outside are the norm. It's been virtually impossible to find shelter space for months. Just 2 weeks ago, I came across a mother and child sleeping in front of St. Patrick's Center late at night. They had one blanket between the two of them and told me that they had called 211 and every homeless service agency they could find. I called many of these agencies alongside them and even emailed some members of the committee for help, and nowhere had space. It took 4 days, personal shelter contacts, and hundreds of dollars of mutual aid funds to get them inside. Their story is not unique. Like we discussed earlier, over 400 people were turned away in just September alone in St. Louis City. In the 7 years I've worked alongside unhoused communities, I've been blown away by the care and courage shown by everyday people in response to the housing crisis. People without houses caring for each other in extreme cold, giving up their blankets and socks. Unhoused folks advocating tirelessly for families sleeping outside. And everyday community members stepping up when the city failed, banding together to organize emergency shelters out of church basements and school buildings during freezing weather. St. Louis community members and St. Louis voters have shown time and time again that they care about the unhoused. However, despite plenty of campaign promises, this passion and courage has not yet been reflected in City Hall. Our current zoning policy does not allow new shelters anywhere in the city without a variance to the code. We have no shelter to offer the vast majority of those sleeping outside. Even this very hearing takes place in a city hall surrounded by barricades, placed to keep unhoused individuals out, invisible, and silent. This bill won't fix everything, but it's a start. This is the committee's chance to turn to the tide. The new zoning process does not guarantee that more shelter will open or prescribe where they will be, but it does create a process to actually have these productive conversations together as a community. I and Arch City Defenders strongly supports this bill and stands alongside the unhoused community members to change. I hope that this committee will do the same. Thank you.
Adria Yeomans. Zoe Mendenhall.
Hello, my name is Zoe Mendenhall. I live in the 10th Ward, and I'm here to advocate for the passing of Board Bill 114 to amend current zoning policies in St. Louis City. By sustaining discriminatory policies against certain types of housing also means denying 2,030 individuals access to essential resources. This legislation would repeal the existing discriminatory ban, ensuring more housing opportunities for all. Amendments will allow the city insight into the support needed for an overall safer and healthier community. As someone who has experienced housing insecurity from a young age and homelessness as an unaccompanied minor, I can unequivocally attest to the need for safe, stable, and accessible housing. As a former and current student with this set of experiences, I urge that this bill is about both the current necessity of non-traditional housing as well as the opportunities made accessible by non-traditional housing. This is my opportunity to try to communicate my widespread care and concern for the safety and well-being of all St. Louis community members, including the 20% of families in the St. Louis public school system that are considered homeless or housing insecure. I am here not only to advocate for a vote yes on Board Bill 114 at tonight's hearing, but I ask that my voice is remembered as my story and my face is seen in spaces where decisions are made behind closed doors. Thank you.
Olivia Sorong.
Good afternoon. My name is Olivia Strayvong, and I'm a resident of Ward 10 in St. Louis. I'm here to voice my strong support for Board Bill 114. Currently, zoning laws in our city prevent people from living in certain areas, which leads to the social exclusion of our multi members. These restrictions on non-traditional housing do not build our city together, but rather push us further apart. Special residential uses, SRUs, are essential for providing safe and accessible housing. As we approach the colder months in this city, the need for shelters and transitional housing becomes even more urgent. Must I have to ask you today, how many more winters must we see people on the streets without beds and at the risk of dying from hypothermia before real change happens? This bill does not introduce changes without oversight. Board Bill 114 offers a balanced approach to managing non-traditional housing with clear requirements that ensure both transparency and accountability. Through the conditional use permit process, each SRU is subject to a thorough review, which allows city officials operations before approval. Additionally, this legislation requires that SRUs submit a detailed plan of operations covering aspects like client capacity, security protocols, staffing, and services offered. These detailed requirements will help city officials understand how each SRU operates with no gray areas. Legislation like Board Bill 114 is long overdue. St. Louis needs legislation that ensures fair housing opportunities for all its citizens. This bill also respects community members' voices by keeping the plat and petition in place, which reinforces again the importance of democracy and public knowledge. People in the city should have the right to housing, and we need the legislation that upholds that right. This legislative body must act quickly to protect SRUs under this bill. Board Bill 114 is a strong start, but this is only the beginning. I also urge us to continue pursuing solutions for long-term housing affordability for all residents of St. Louis. You today have the power to pass Board Bill 114 and take a valuable step towards a more equitable and inclusive St. Louis. This bill is not just about policy. It's about protecting vulnerable individuals who deserve a chance to thrive. Thank you for your attention and for considering this important issue.
Abby Leonard in support.
Hello, my name is Abby Leonard, and I'm a social worker at Legal Services of Eastern Missouri here in St. Louis and a resident of the 7th Ward. I work in LSCM's housing and consumer law units where we assist and represent low-income families and individuals facing housing instability, eviction, loss of housing assistance, poor living conditions, discrimination, and other crises. Our work demonstrates an overwhelming lack of shelter options for our unhoused and housing unstable families and clients, and a clear and urgent need for safe and affordable housing in St. Louis. In accordance with the National Low-Income Housing Coalition and the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Legal Services uses the Housing First philosophy, a proven model for addressing homelessness that prioritizes access to permanent, stable housing linked with voluntary services as needed. Housing First recognizes that stable housing is the primary prerequisite for support services and that individuals facing homelessness or housing instability can better thrive when they have stable housing first and foremost. In doing this work, the glaring lack of shelter options and affordable, safe housing in the city is impossible to ignore. Dozens of my clients in the past year alone have struggled to access shelter beds, receive misinformation regarding openings, or get turned away from shelters. So their only option is to sleep in their cars, on the street, or if they're lucky, double up with a friend or family member. Some, faced with no other options, move into unsafe homes riddled with toxic mold, water and flood damage, caved-in roofs, non-functional heat or air conditioning, and other dangerous conditions issues to avoid being on the street. Amending the zoning regulations for special residential use established by Board Bill 114 will provide housing opportunities to St. Louisans that are not adequately served by existing resources and whose needs are not otherwise addressed by the current city zoning regulations. These changes will allow for the creation of shelters in the city and leave families less likely to have to turn to substandard housing. In my experience at Legal Services, St. Louis families struggle to access both temporary shelter and permanent housing options in the city. Board Bill 114, if enacted, would allow for safer homes and neighborhoods in the city where residents can thrive. A community that is safely housing its residents has numerous benefits, including a greater workforce participation, decreased strain on emergency services, and a higher quality of life for everyone in the city. I urge the HUD's committee to pass Board Bill 114 in the city of St. Louis. Thank you.
Jake Linefield.
Hi, my name is Jake Linefields. I live in the 7th Ward, and my pronouns are he, him, his. I hope the neighbor who phoned in her testimony in opposition to Board Bill 114 is still on, because I think verbatim she asked what data supports the necessity of these changes. I think it's really clear that the answer has been in this room tonight. She's been willing to listen. We have housing mediators who are talking about how a lot of us are on the brink of needing non-traditional housing. We have folks from the continuum of care who talk about a lack of beds. We have Dr. Pearson, who talked about some pretty appalling statistics, including how in September alone over 400 people were turned away from shelters because of a lack of capacity. We have multiple unhoused or formerly unhoused neighbors in this room, some of whom spoke for the first time and talked about their experience. We also have people who have worked with our neighbors who are formerly incarcerated and talked about how having housing reduces recidivism, which means we're reducing crime by passing Board Bill 114. But the other thing that I think is important to note is that we have elections coming up in the spring. And specifically, we have a mayoral race where, frankly, at least per a lot of the conversations I've heard, a lot of residents are pretty lukewarm about some of the options in front of us. Were the mayor to sign this bill, I would personally see it as a very good reason to support her reelection. I also think that passing this bill, voting for this bill, would be a very good reason to support those aldermanic candidates who are running in the odd wards, which are the ones that are up for reelection this spring. I personally will proudly be casting my vote to reelect Alderwoman Saunier for her leadership on this bill and on the bills that she fought for earlier this year. Thank you so much.
Jeff McDonald in support. Excuse me, your mic's not on. Can you turn your mic on?
There we go. I'll start over. My name is Jet McDonald. On behalf of the organization Empower Missouri, I am providing testimony in support of Board Bill 114. I am also personally a resident of Ward 7 in the city of St. Louis. Empower Missouri leads a statewide coalition advocating for evidence-based public policy to expand affordable housing and support Missourians in need of stable housing. Across the nation, we are witnessing an unprecedented rise in rent costs, with St. Louis seeing one of the highest increases among major U.S. cities. The city's median rent has risen by over 17% in the past year alone, an increase of more than $320 per month from 2023 to 24. St. Louis also faces a critical shortage of nearly 100,000 affordable and available units for our low-income neighbors. These major challenges have put more and more city residents at risk of homelessness. St. Louisans urgently need housing solutions. Emergency shelter is a life-saving resource in concert with long-term evidence-based solutions like expanded permanent supportive housing. Non-traditional housing is especially vital during harsh weather. Every winter represents extremely dangerous, sometimes life-threatening realities faced by our unhoused, housing insecure neighbors. This crisis should not be accepted as routine, but rather considered an emergency that warrants systems-level change and a constructive approach to special residential uses. Clearly defined, community-centered, and equitable zoning legislation should be one of the next steps. Current zoning policy has prevented St. Louis City from providing resources that are widely needed in our community. Passage of Board Bill 114 can help pave the way for necessary infrastructure, just as we need enough hospitals and classrooms. Empower Missouri urges you to pass this legislation and reduce a major obstacle to our city's well-being. Thank you.
Chris Otolong.
Good evening. My name is Chris Adelino. I'm a resident of St. Louis's 6th Ward. I want to thank the chairwoman and the committee members that are here. And I want to kind of echo something the chairwoman mentioned earlier, which is thank you for making the time available for those of us who cannot come out during the day to all these to be able to testify and share what we've had to say today. Like many of the people in this room, I was here last year for a meeting where we talked about a problem that we all agree exists, which is the lack of availability of housing for everyone in the city, which is sort of a ludicrous concept when you think about it, but it is what it is. And I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I don't think many of us want to be here next year talking about the lack of available housing in the city. But we do need to recognize, and everyone there recognizes it, it's a major structural issue. And that means it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of work to dismantle, because that's what structural issues are. There are already major pillars upholding those. Capitalism, racism, lots of other systems of exploitation and oppression. So why do we as a city need to build all these other supports? Why aren't we dismantling those? We have these major obstacles in our way. Why can't we start to work to tear those down instead of building our own obstacles to address the issues which face all the people in the city? So I urge the members of the committee and all the members of the board to vote in favor of Board Bill 114, and I see the rest of my time. Thank you.
We have Dallas Adams in support.
Good evening, members of the Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning Committee. Good evening to everyone in the room tonight. My name is Dallas Adams, and I am a proud resident of the 3rd Ward in the Dutchtown neighborhood. And today I am taking the opportunity to testify in full support of Board Bill 114. First, I'd like to start by declaring something that I've heard echoed, maybe not explicitly, but I'd like to explicitly say that housing is a human right. If you are a living, be housed. I've seen and heard from community members, not only in my community, but in neighboring communities, how this bill will bring drugs, criminal activity, deplorable conditions, sink their investments in their homes, and bring that to their doorsteps. And I'd like to urge us to challenge our worldviews that only certain types of people are unhoused. And we've heard that from service providers and people who have previously been unhoused, that you can look like anything. You don't have to use drugs to become unhoused. You don't have to be chronically homeless to remain unhoused. And everybody deserves to be housed regardless of the circumstances and unique lived experiences that they have. I, too, echo Jake in hoping that the person who spoke in opposition online is here, because I did hear her ask about the numbers and the need. And so we've heard from someone, and we all know that 20% of our public school families are unhoused or housing insecure. And according to a tool built for Zero Continuum of Care dashboard, more than 2,000 people in the city of St. Louis this month have identified as experiencing homelessness, and 175 of those individuals represent families with children, and another 192 of those individuals represent youth under the age of 18. People experiencing homelessness exist all around us and, again, deserve safe, secure housing when the need arises. Amending this zoning code will allow for the diversity of housing that our city needs to ensure that providers who are willing and able to meet this need have the tools they need to do so. Our communities suffer greatly due to the lack of housing we need to ensure that everyone is safe and secure. Every winter, The third ward especially braces for vacancies to be breached and go up in flames, putting undue pressure on our already fragile emergency response teams. We see people who are abused and sometimes murdered in the case of one of our dear unhoused neighbors in the third ward in front of our business homes. We see them stripping their clothes in below freezing weather, their bodies overwhelmed by the late stage effects of hypothermia and other cold weather diseases. And by continuing to ignore this call to empower service providers with the basic tools they need to be able to meet this need, we pass this responsibility on to our neighbors to step in and fill the gaps that our system leaves unfilled. I believe the father in the room made note to Lazarus. And as a city and as a region, I am so thankful to see that there are initiatives being stood up, but it has disappointed me for so long to see leaders play hot potato with people who are unhoused and joining hands to say it will take a regional approach where no hands go up to actually solve the need first. And so I am urging this legislative body to use the power and opportunity they have to be very clear, take the very first bare minimum step to be able to take a series of steps that will allow service providers to meet the needs of our most vulnerable citizens. Yesterday is always the best time to take action, but now is the very next best time. And so I am proud to support Board Bill 114, and I encourage the members of this committee to push this through to the full Board of Aldermen with a due pass recommendation. Thank you.
Marty Joe.
We want both of you all to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, oh, you already know how that's about to go. So we'll try to get through this. Hi, everyone. My name is Marty Joe Murray. I'm the former 7th Ward Committee, and I'm also the Democrat from Missouri's House District 78. And I currently reside in the 8th Ward. And this is my legislative assistant, Michaela Malian. So thank you so much for taking time to hear our testimony. I am testifying in support of Board Bill 114. And my background when it comes to advocating for the unhoused, I am currently a board member for Peter and Paul Community Services, and I previously served on the Governor's Committee to End Homelessness. And year over year, we've seen it. Over the past decade, the city has treated their approach for addressing the homelessness issue in the same way that they do inclement weather, right? They look at the weather report. Is it going to be freezing temperatures? Okay, now let's do something about it. And I think right now, in this moment, and I encourage, this committee as well as a broader board to let this just be the beginning and not the end, because there is a need, right? Like the question isn't, is there an issue in terms of the unhoused, but rather, what are we going to do about it? And I think this board bill goes a step in the right direction, and I am encouraged by the operational plan provisions that are in the board bill, because that's one thing I would like to do, to be able to go up to Jefferson City and say, the 78th district, the city of St. Louis, this is what our capacity is in terms of addressing this issue, and this is why we need X amount of dollars to help fund that, right? Because I know at the end of the day, that's oftentimes the question is like, okay, we know there's an issue, but how can we fund it? So I think this just helps us get into that direction in terms of saying this is what our operational plan looks like for the city. One thing I also want to say is, just thanking Alderwoman Saulnier as well as the board for taking a step in this direction, because year over year, we've seen the executive branch in the city of St. Louis, administration over administration, not really take an approach to solving this. And I think the Board of Aldermen, you all have power as well, right? And I think I appreciate you all for taking a step in that direction. And one thing that many people have testified tonight in terms of what housing insecurity looks like. One thing that hasn't been said, and I want to kind of highlight, is that right now life is hard for so many people, especially for our seniors. And I think there's a growing population, a wave that's coming to this city, to this region, to this country, in terms of our seniors becoming housing insecure. And I think this board bill, like I said, is just a step in that direction to helping us solve it. So I would just encourage the members of this committee as well as the broader board to pass this bill out of committee, but then also go forward and champion it on the in the chamber in support of it. So thank you.
We definitely want to hear from you. You have something to say, young lady?
Nah, she said ready to go home.
Caitlin Stanley. In support.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Stanley, and I'm a resident of the 6th Ward. I'm here to encourage you to support Board Bill 114, a critical step towards meeting the urgent housing needs of St. Louis vulnerable youth. I currently work in a specialized unit for youth in the foster care system, particularly those at high risk of experiencing labor trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation, as well as youth who frequently go missing. Among the most critical challenges affecting this vulnerable population is the urgent need for safe and accessible housing. Youth experiencing these injustices often face crises that require immediate intervention, some form of housing to protect their well-being and ensure their safety. Currently, St. Louis has a devastatingly insufficient number of emergency shelters and non-traditional housing options experiencing any sort of crisis. Opening new and non-traditional housing options for youth is already challenging due to strict state and federal licensing regulations, and St. Louis's zoning restrictions only add further obstacles. On any given day, I receive between 5 to 10 emails from staff asking for bed openings in St. Louis for youth in need of housing that night. On a good day, the emails at the end of the day state there are no youth awaiting housing for the night, and on a bad day, and all too common day, a schedule is sent around to staff to sign up for shifts to watch youth who have to stay in a hotel. And let me tell you, it is not the Four Seasons Hotel, or the office that night because there are no available places for them to go. To put this into even more perspective, recently a 14-year-old was recovered out of a situation where she was being forced to have sex with adult men. She was not from the St. Louis area, and due to that time of day she was recovered, we were unable to get her back to her home that day. After making many phone calls, we were told there were no beds available. After informing the youth she would have to stay in a hotel that night with staff watching her 24/7, she became rightfully upset and decided she would rather return to the unsafe housing she came from than sleep in a dingy hotel with strange people rotating in and out. To her, this housing solution was no different than the one she came out of. This youth and many like her continue to have their vulnerabilities exploited, and social service providers have no effective solutions because of the lack of non-traditional housing available. Youth experiencing homelessness are acutely vulnerable, making them prime targets for commercial exploitation by those who prey on their unmet needs. Their heightened vulnerability is not just a risk factor, it's a direct pathway to exploitation as predators exploit their need for shelter and basic needs. Stabilizing services cannot be effective without safe, stable housing. Availability of non-traditional housing is a key factor in addressing an individual's needs. To protect and meet the needs of vulnerable youth in St. Louis, we must remove unnecessary barriers to non-traditional housing. Board Bill 114 represents a crucial step forward, creating more pathways for the types of non-traditional housing young people urgently need. Thank you.
Elijah Beal in support.
Hi, good evening. My name is Elijah Beal, and I'm a resident of Ward 5. I'm here to speak in support of Board Bill 114 as both a social worker, but also from the deeply personal perspective of someone who grew up in a community where policies to support vulnerable residents was treated as an afterthought. After my father was incarcerated while in high school, he struggled with substance abuse, and like so many others in my community, faced the nearly impossible task of securing stable housing with a felony conviction. Fortunately, my father was able to find housing with family, but not everyone is that lucky. For so many people in my home community, there is no safety net, as in St. Louis. I saw countless families around me face the same barriers with not enough housing solutions available to them. My father understood how critical it is to create conditions for people like him who are trying to rebuild their lives. But years later, when he attempted to open a non-traditional housing program in our town in Indiana, he encountered layers upon layers of resistance. Opaque, confusing zoning processes and strong opposition from elected officials and the public made it impossible for him to create the kind of housing that could have transformed lives. What happened is not unique to my small hometown in Indiana. It's part of a national crisis to solve homelessness, and it's directly tied to ongoing issues here in the city. As a resident of the Northampton neighborhood, and in stark contrast to previous individuals who spoke from my ward, I actually want to see more non-traditional housing around me. I'm not afraid of this change, nor see this as something that would change the quote-unquote character of my street. I actually welcome it. Yeah, I believe this amendment will help strengthen my already diverse and vibrant neighborhood while easing the burden on more poverty-stricken areas of our city that disproportionately bear the weight of housing our most vulnerable residents. We have a chance right now with this bill to lead by example. This zoning amendment is truly very simple yet crucial because it will bring transparency to a process that can serve as a roadblock for housing providers like the one that my father envisioned. By streamlining zoning rules and making it clearer for how providers effectively operate, we move one step closer to ending homelessness. Thank you.
Sarah Mendola.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mendiola. I'm here as a resident of Ward 10, and I'm here to testify in support of Board Bill 114, Alderwoman Sonier's proposed amendment of the zoning code regarding special residential uses. For years, we've been aware that our existing unhoused service sector does not have enough capacity to serve everyone in need. In particular, it's well known that there is a shortage of shelter beds in the existing. But the shortage of beds is not the end of the issues with St. Louis's unhoused services system. It's also clear that the services that do exist don't fit the needs that our unhoused community has. Some are turned away because they have families, they have pets, they have personal items with them that don't fit within the restrictions of the shelters, as well as many other reasons. This bill opens up a pathway for a diverse set of shelters to open, ones that fit the needs of the diverse set of unhoused people from communities across our city, like those that we've heard from tonight, the LGBTQ+ community, formerly incarcerated folks, unhoused youth and families, and more. And the requirement of operational use plans makes sure that the care being extended is high quality and tailored to the needs of these underserved communities. Board Bill 114 also creates a clearer pathway by which special residential uses may be distributed throughout the city rather than remaining concentrated in certain locations. Lack of accessibility is one of the biggest barriers to housing and support services for unhoused people. When physical location is one of the major issues blocking access to services, facilities distribution throughout the city can make or break whether an unhoused person is able to get the support they need to get back on their feet and find stability. It's hard to hold down a job. It's hard to take care of your health. It's hard to make it safely to the next day when you don't know where you're going to sleep at night. Better integrating these facilities into the broader community will better connect individuals to other needed services and amenities like transit, like employment, healthcare, and other daily needs. I urge you all on this committee to pass Board Bill 114 by addressing the current prohibition on SRUs, providing clear regulations, and ensuring quality of care. We can take the first step to create a more equitable and inclusive community for all. Thank you for listening. Good night.
Stephanie Culver in support.
Hi, everyone. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who took the time to show up here in support for the hearing. And thank you as well to the Board of Aldermen in front of me. My name is Stephanie Chen. I'm a student from University City, and I also work in a nonprofit organization called Heart for the Unhoused. And I'm here today to express my support for Alderwoman Sonier's Board Bill 114. As someone who does street volunteering with unhoused individuals in our city, I've seen firsthand the urgent need for stable sources of housing. From my conversations with individuals living in tent encampments and on the streets, it's clear that access to shelters and housing is crucial for the well-being of our unhoused neighbors in this city. This bill is a vital step towards breaking down barriers for shelters, transitional housing, and other non-traditional types of housing to exist. And by passing it, we will help to be able to provide essential resources needed in our city. Thank you.
Rachel Hurtado in support.
I have to swear in.
Alderwoman. Alderwoman.
Anybody else after her that we need to? I know what I was saying. Is there anybody else after her? I can go ahead. Okay, let's go. Raise your right hand. You special. Raise your right hand. You swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, let's go.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Hurtado. I live in Ward 7, and I'm here to express my support for Board Bill 114. I wanted to start by saying thank you to, of course, all the community members who showed out, but also our elected officials here, our city government workers. You are here at 6 o'clock at City Hall in the evening time. You would rather be at home. We would rather be at home. And I hope that this is like a testament that when you make hearings more accessible to community, we show up, we come out. We're here to make our voices heard. So just thank you. Thank you very much for making this a more accessible time for us to come and make our voices heard to y'all. Thank you for all the work that's happened on this bill. It has truly the product of a ton of work that has happened. It is proof that our elected officials will kind of go for something and then get community feedback, elected official feedback, feedback from city departments, and then go back to the room and work on it. A ton of collaboration went into this bill, working with city department heads, city officials, community engagement, neighborhoods. This bill has had a lot of work on it, and I think it's a really, really incredible collaboration, a product of this collaboration, especially with the city departments and leaders who support this bill, including the mayor's office and the building commissioner. A couple of things that I wanted to note in addition to co-signing everything folks said in support of this bill tonight. I wanted to mention one point about the data. So some opponents of this bill have noted that there's questions of, is this even necessary? Is there even a need? I just wanted to note quickly to y'all that for the turnaway tracker, which notes how many people are turned away from shelters in the city and the county every day, a good number of case managers and direct service providers have said that they don't even record all of the turnaways in that system because they aren't seeing change happen from that data. So at very best, it is an underestimation of the need for shelter beds in our city and for non-traditional housing in our city. So I just wanted to note that is true. The data is, accurate, but at best, there is more of a need than what the data shows. I also wanted to touch quickly on another piece of something that people who oppose this bill have mentioned, the Housing First STL Summit. I attended the Housing First STL Summit. Yes, there's a lot of work going on with regional collaboration, but what some opponents to this bill have said is that waiting for a regional plan is important, that we wait for that to happen so that we can have this big collaborative approach. I was at this summit. The mayor of St. Charles was on one end and mayors of other, counties in the region using extremely stigmatizing and nasty language towards our unhoused neighbors, and talking about their newest model for approaching the unhoused crisis, an arrest and incarcerate model. They're arresting unhoused folks to try and get them into services, and they're wondering why that's not working. So I hope that our elected officials, not only here but at the full board as well, recognize that it is not our job, it is not your job to wait for the rest of the catch up. It is St. Louis's job to be a leader, to champion this type of policy change and legislation so that we can move closer to housing justice. Because if we wait around for everyone to be on the same page, we're never going to get there. But St. Louis, we have an opportunity to be champions of change. And we can do both. We can respond to crisis needs in an agile way for immediate needs because winter is coming soon and we need more shelter beds. We can do that. We can address people's material conditions.
Excuse me, that's your time.
Thank you. And we can also move our way towards overarching long-term systems level change in pursuit of housing justice. You don't have to pick one. We can respond to people's immediate conditions now, and we can make policy changes like this. So I encourage y'all to support this bill, not only here, but at the full board as well. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Sanye, welcome back. Bless you.
Okay, well, first of all, just thank you again. It is 8:19 p.m. and we are still here. And as we should show up because housing is a human right. So I'm so glad that we're present to support that. And my colleagues, again, we're still here at 8:19 p.m. And I know because I was on the phone with some of y'all at 8 a.m. this morning that that's at least 12 hours. So thank you to you all. I'm a little thrown off. It feels so different from the last time I was up here. I feel very proud right now on the inside. I feel very proud. I feel very happy and very encouraged and very inspired. And so I just know that we do have Director Milberg here from the mayor's office. And I don't know if she wanted to kind of just give some final statements from the mayor's office and on behalf of the departments. And again, I know it was lifted up a lot that the collaboration was again, but I definitely want to just lift that up again because especially Director Milberg has kind of been the point person for all of our conversations. We've talked sometimes at 7:30 a.m. and then again at 7:30 p.m. and then again at 10 p.m. We've had conversations about so many possible amendments. We've made sure to keep legal involved in every single department head. And so just want to make sure I thank you and the mayor's office and all of the departments again, because even you all are here. And I know you started your jobs very early this morning. And just really thank you all for this effort, because I think that it really does take this type of collaboration to move our city and region forward.
Well, thank you so much, Alderwoman. And again, for the record, Casey Milberg, Policy Director in the Mayor's Office. I'll keep it brief because there's been a lot of people who showed up tonight. This has been the result of more than a year of a lot of very intensive, very thoughtful, occasionally very difficult and very honest conversations on a policy that is area that is extremely nuanced. It is extremely human, and it is something a lot of people have a lot of different thoughts on. And over the course of a year and more, we've really worked with the benefit of having our extraordinary city team and their extraordinary insight and their work, guiding us throughout to put together a policy that is achievable, it's implementable, it puts more oversight, transparency, consistency. At the same time, it provides additional pathways to increase access while at the same time incorporating more community input. It is the result of a lot of listening to a lot of feedback that has been shared. And it's also responsible policy too, and I want to stress that. As a city, we have an obligation and a duty to be mindful always with the legislation we pass that we can back it up. And that's especially true when it comes to our most vulnerable of our most vulnerable, which is the group that we're talking about tonight. And everything that is in this bill, we know we can back up with implementation, we can back up legally, and we can certainly back up morally, right? So we're so grateful to everyone who's participated in this. The mayor looks forward to this coming to her desk. She's grateful to the Alderwoman for her diligent, persistent work in this. And we would ask for a favorable vote out of committee tonight.
Chairwoman, that wraps it up. I don't know if you want to do a last round of questions from colleagues or how you want to proceed.
Let's go with questions. Is Alderman Cone still?
I am.
Okay. You can proceed, Alderman Cone.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to commend Alderwoman Saunier on, pardon me, on her efforts with this bill. This is obviously not the first time that this bill has been before us, and also as a member of the Planning Commission, it's not the first or second time that this has been before myself. And the previous two times that it was before me, I've brought this up and also in private conversation with the Alderwoman, but I continue to have a concern around the language in the bill, particularly as it pertains to the non-discrimination policy. And I have an amendment before us that I'd like to introduce, which would be amendment number 3, which would, as the bill is currently written, it does not require anyone to adhere to the city's non-discrimination policy with respect to particularly gender identity and expression, so our trans community. And I know in conversations that part of that has been around quote unquote so-called religious liberty. And, the city is very firm in its non-discrimination policy, particularly as it, pertains to sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, religion, etc. And I think that we need to be a little bit more firm in our approach to ensure that members, particularly within the LGBTQ community, are protected and have access to housing. As I've mentioned several times before in other committee meetings and whatnot, this is an issue that has come before me through friends, through constituents, where housing instability has led them to a shelter, and the shelter has told them that they can't come back because of them transitioning or what have you. So I think it's important that when we have these operational plans, that there's an affirmation that they're going to adhere to that non-discrimination policy versus, as it's currently written, asking a question, will they comply with protecting those individuals or providing housing for those individuals? So, I believe the amendment is before everyone, Madam Chair.
Yes.
So I would like to introduce amendment number 3 to Board Bill number 114, which would essentially strike section 10 and add the new section 10, which is affirming that these organizations that are submitting an operation plan have to affirm their non-discrimination policy to be inclusive, and providing a rationale as to how they're going to be inclusive with their housing program.
Okay. Vice Chair Sanye.
So Alderman Cone, this has been a point of conversation. I will say it's a bit disappointing to see the amendment in the drive and to find out about the amendment that you're proposing today from a colleague. I think one thing I've been very intentional about doing every step of the way, the 2 amendments that you saw today, and even when you raised this to me prior to it going to Planning Commission, is making sure that every time we do a change to this bill, I go and I work with the people who have worked with me for hours and meeting after meeting to make sure that this is a bill that we can do. And so as I, said to you before, I just wanted to uplift, I just think as colleagues, it was an opportunity here where you could have contacted me beforehand and let me know, hey, I'm going to be proposing this. This is coming your way. I really wish I could have found out about it that way, and that's the respect I always give you as my colleague. But then just secondly, in response to the amendment, again, just as I said before we went to the Planning Commission, I want to be clear that I stand in full support and full solidarity with this community, and especially as a person who's been championing this and put in blood, sweat, and tears to move us to do anything on this issue. This is a priority for me, and I would love to do this. But I cannot, in good conscience, make false promises or do things that we've been told by legal, that we've been told that we cannot do. I'm not a lawyer. That is not my expertise, but I have made sure that I talk to the Building Commission, that I talk to the mayor's office, that I talk to our council, that I talk to the council, the city councilor, and make sure that what we're doing. And again, what I've been told is that we cannot do this. And so I want us to do something around this issue, as I have since I've, gotten elected and got sworn in. And I don't want us to put something in a bill, one, that might be a false promise. We telling folks that we can do this, and we don't have the means to back that up on the back end. I don't want to do that, especially when someone is already at one of their lowest points of searching for a basic need. But 2, I also cannot support doing this because we've been told specifically by legal, and because you just brought this to me again today, when we had our first hearing on the floor last week, you didn't mention this again to me, and you've not mentioned this again to me since I added the original language before the Planning Commission to add the statement, the question about who they would be serving. You have not brought this back to me, so I also have not had an opportunity today to check back in with legal or check back in with zoning or check back in with building or check back in with the city councilor
counselor to make sure that this works. And so out of respect for, you know, again, the process that we've done so far, the people who I've been working with, the lines of communication, I've worked really hard to be as transparent, and all of the blood, sweat, and tears that has gone into getting us this point, I cannot support this amendment, and I will also urge committee members to not support this amendment. And I know
Alderwoman,
that
the last conversation that you and I had with respect to this amendment, you indicated that the city councilor's office, which I have not seen any legal opinion from the city's councilor's office with respect to what you shared with me. So until I have a legal opinion from the city councilor's office, I'm going to assert that the non-discrimination policy that's in place for the city of St. Louis, which covers specifically housing, should be applied to anyone who is providing housing to those who are housing insecure.
again, Alderman Cone, because you're bringing this to me today, you are not leaving me an opportunity to
Alderwoman,
go back
respectfully,
and
I
have
brought
the
this to you
conversation.
before this went to the Planning Commission.
You did not ever come to me,
Respectfully,
Alderman,
I
and
brought this
say,
to you previously, before you even introduced the board bill. So you know that this is a concern that I've had for quite some time now.
I want to make sure you're done talking before I talk. Okay. So again, I did not know you had any concerns today, because the last time we had a conversation was before I made the amendment in the Planning Commission, which you came and said, I had these concerns. I said, okay, Alderman, let me go back and see what I can do. And I went and talked to folks and see what we could do. And then we saw the addition of the change in Planning Commission. Since then, you have not reached out to me and said anything. I had no clue that this was going to be before us today. And it's not that I disagree
Alderwoman.
with you. And again, I let you finish, so I would like the same respect. It's not that I disagree with you. It is that I have not had the chance to go talk to the stakeholders and the people who are involved. So if you have talked to legal about this amendment in front of us and they've told you that we can do this, then I'm happy to support it. But if you have not talked to legal, and someone's from the mayor's office is here as well, so I'm happy to ask Director Milberg to come back up. I cannot support it because, again, I've been going and working extremely hard to be as transparent and to keep everybody aligned and on the same page and have no surprises. So again, it's not that I disagree with you. I would love in an ideal world to do this amendment, but I don't see anything. All of that I've heard from the entities that have been working with me in good faith have said that we cannot. If you have something supporting that we can, I'm happy to, but I've not seen that, and you just brought this to me today in committee.
First of all, Alderwoman, at the Planning Commission, they said that they wouldn't be able to do that during the Planning Commission, that we would have to do it through the board bill process, through the legislative process. That was at the Planning Commission. Second of all, you have not supplied the legal opinion to me, and neither has the administration, with respect to why we're taking preference on religious liberty over a specific city ordinance that's already on the books that protects people from discrimination in housing for sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression. I have not been provided with that level of specificity. All I've been told is your word. I have not been given any one specific legal opinion. And any alderperson can proffer an amendment to a board bill. And that's what I have chosen to do this evening.
Again, as I said before, you did not ask me to see the legal opinion. You just brought that to me today in committee with the cameras rolling. So if that would have been an ask that I would have received before that, then I would have gone the extra step to go and get you the legal opinion. But I've not heard from you prior to today that you wanted a legal opinion. Again, we don't disagree, Alderman. I would love to do this, but I'm not going to support something that I've been told is not legally doable. If you want a legal opinion, we're on the record. The camera's rolling today. I've shown good work ethic. I've worked in good faith. I've followed up on everything along so far. I will go reach out and have that conversation and see if I can get that for you in writing. But you just gave me that ask today in committee, so I cannot support this amendment today.
That's fine, Alderwoman. I'm still putting the amendment forward. There's a reason why there are severability clauses in our ordinances and our board bills. So if it is quote unquote illegal, then it can be struck down. But I think that we need to take a principled stance as a city to protect what we believe to be protected classes within the city. And as someone who was the original sponsor of the bill to include gender identity and expression in our non-discrimination ordinance, That's something that I continue to stand up for. And it's something that I think that we all should be doing and having those conversations versus saying, oh, well, religious liberty prevents us from doing so.
I would like to ask, if possible, either zoning or Ms. Milberg, Director Milberg, would be open to come just to give us, as the members here, a little more clarity because.
Hi, Casey Milberg, Policy Director in the Mayor's Office. So when we think about the layers of enforceability, it's federal, state, local. Local's preempted by state, state's preempted by federal. The strongest nexus that exists in terms of enforcement is money. And right now that means federal money and local money. Federal money is the money that comes from HUD. Several years ago, HUD passed internal regulations and policies saying if you are a shelter and you receive HUD money, then yes, you can be bound to comply with HUD's federal requirements, which does include gender identity and sexual orientation, non-discrimination provisions. If we as a city are funding you and you get our money, that gives us the enforcement mechanism for you. Money is the enforcement mechanism. It sure as heck is not the state of Missouri's laws, and even the federal legal framework has a lot of catching up to do in terms of enforcement provisions for gender identity and sexual orientation. So we all are on the same page about wanting to go as far as we can to provide space and access and resources for this population. But everyone in this room, everyone watching tonight should understand that when it comes to enforcement, it's money. Money the city provides, money the feds provide through HUD. If federal HUD money is not in the mix, if city money is not in the mix, then that does limit the city's options to enforce beyond what state law and what even federal law says.
Alderwoman Spicer has a follow-up for that.
Thank you. I'm reading this amendment, and I'm trying to figure out, the legal difference in what is in the bill and what is the change. In this, what's in the bill is a question saying, will you be serving everyone with your within your identified population, regardless of race, color, ancestry, so forth, without, and then if not, please explain. And then insert thereof, the statement of the organization providing housing, a amendment to the non-discrimination policy. There's nothing in what we're doing either currently in the bill or in this amendment that would change whether or not, they submitted an operational plan. It doesn't prohibit them from submitting an operational plan. It doesn't prohibit them from being considered if they said yes or no, if they affirm or deny. There's nothing in this that changes what might be an outcome for someone applying, just to make sure I'm understanding what Alderman, and maybe Alderman Cohen can speak to it, maybe you all can, but I'm not seeing anything in this amendment, I guess I'm trying to get to, that changes what we're asking for here.
So the language that I have before me says statement from the organization providing housing, affirming their commitment to the city's non-discrimination policy. And as it's been presented, as it's written, that to my reading suggests that as a condition of them getting approved, that they have to affirm that they are going to commit to all aspects of the city's non-discrimination policy. So for example, if you're a Catholic Charities, a very large provider of housing services for whether it's our international population, whether it's any of our other unhoused residents, if by way of example, that religious organization's personal beliefs, their religious beliefs rather, do not fully uphold the city's non-discrimination ordinances, that would mean that that organization is not able to submit an operation plan that is in compliance, with the city's ordinances pertaining to non-discrimination. So if they are required to, quote, affirm their commitment to that ordinance in all aspects, it is in all aspects, that would seem to take them out of the table completely.
Because if they couldn't provide the statement of affirmation, they wouldn't be able to submit their operational plan based on this wording of this amendment. Making sure I understood.
As
the
opposed to
difference.
question.
Which is a yes, no.
Right, we're not
And then
mandating
the
you.
conditional use process, or, and I know I have things to say, as you're probably not surprised about the whole bill, but, sorry, Rasheen, Alderman, Alders. The, the question that's being asked, the neighbors of this, people who were filling out the plat petition, when they have the operational plan in front of them, they'd be able to see this question and be asked and say whether or not they would support the shelter because the question was asked and what they said.
Correct. Correct.
But if they weren't going to have a statement affirming that the city's non-discrimination policy and what they're doing, then they wouldn't have an operational plan to put together. That's what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the big difference is really in mandating it as a statement of requirement for the operational plan versus just in general asking a question of inquiry, which is not setting any expectations or saying that if for some reason you can't serve everyone within that population, you are not meeting the standards of our process. It's just asking you. And then whoever is reviewing that can take that into consideration, but the city has not made it so that in order for you to go through this process.
Alderman Cohn's question and point was really interesting about how does this work in traditional housing markets, rental housing, what the city is able to say you can and can't discriminate, based on various things. I'm interested in that.
Sure. Yeah. So we have the landscape of the Federal Fair Housing Act deals with private housing differently than it deals with shelters. They're just completely different ball games. Again, with the Fed's nexus for enforcement of sexual orientation, gender identity issues when it comes to shelter housing is through HUD. It is through HUD money. It's through HUD policy. When it comes to apartments, homes, rentals, if you have somebody who's showing you a property, that is treated differently. It's also something that, you have the city of St. Louis is not necessarily providing the same kinds of funding when it comes to private housing as it is when it comes to shelters. We're certainly getting a lot of more money pumped into, affordable housing and whatnot, but we have different legal frameworks under the Fair Housing Act and in terms of the HUD funding enforcement mechanisms for shelters.
Mm-hmm. I think this one's tough because I want anyone providing any sort of housing in the city to have a statement of affirmation that they will not discriminate, that they will handle concerns related to the population. I mean, I want this. I don't understand if it's legal or not. And I think I feel like I'm getting a sense that no, you don't think it is.
That is my strong sense. Again, the nexus is money. It's federal HUD money. It is local money. That's our enforcement mechanism, right? Because we don't have state laws in Missouri like the state of California does. We don't even have the federal legal framework that goes as far as is needed to enforce protections in our shelters for our unhoused for those who are, LGBTQIA+.
Yeah, I would say that we all want to. I really do want to do this. I think if we could do this, I certainly would. But again, we did have in-depth, conversations beforehand where we're told not to. And I also would lift up that I think putting the question out there and requiring an answer does put the information out there, and then all the parties can take it into consideration. It's just crafted very carefully so that it wasn't looked at as an expectation that the city was mandating it, but rather just information we were asking for.
Yeah, I see the difference. Thank you for answering my questions.
Alderman Browning, did you have any remarks or questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Yeah, anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I think I would kind of echo the alderwoman from the first ward, the Schweitzer district. as a black gay man, like I totally understand the importance of making sure that there is language that also protect um, individuals within our community. I think with not being able just to, there's just a comment, not having the full ability to digest it, it would be good to know on this if this is, I guess, if you have Casey from the mayor's office who have worked on this, questioning if this would legally be an issue, it would just be good to, for me personally, to be able to clear this up before understanding like what to do next on it. And it's tough because, like I say, also like the alderman said, want to make sure that we have language in there that maybe can go a little stiffer and harder to make sure that we're protecting individuals, but also want to make sure that if we get this across the finish line, that all I's are dotted and T's are crossed legally. So I'll just say that as a comment, and that's all, Madam Chairwoman.
So how would you like to, and Alderman Cone, I know you're still on too. What's our medium here on this? I know that none of, I mean, here the sentiments clearly are in consensus, but we do want to make sure that it passes the legal mustard on this, and we have our recommendation from the mayor's office. We have the work that's been done prior to this, but we absolutely respect the position of your position, rather, Alderman Cone. We want to make sure we're clear on that. So I guess I'm asking, I hate to be asking this like this. It's like sometimes these conversations need to be had prior, but what do we see here in moving forward in moving forward for you for your legislation?
If Alderman Cone wants to bring his amendment to a vote, I would just reiterate that I would urge the committee to vote no. If Alderman Cone is willing to table it, and maybe we can go talk to legal together, which I'm happy to do and would have been happy to do if I knew that this is, where you were, then we can also do that. Again, I don't support it because I really don't want to risk all of the work that has gone into this and the line, but risk being able to move something forward, and definitely also don't want to make any false promises and say that we can do something that we can't. But I'm happy if he would like to call for a vote to do that. But if he would like to table this, I will go with you, and we can send an email together or go to the city councilor's office together to, continue these conversations, whichever route the alderman from the 3rd would prefer.
Alderwoman, I'm fine working with you on this. I was hoping to do that. That's why I brought it to your attention prior to you even introducing this board bill. I thought I was very clear that this is an issue that is very important to me prior to you even introducing the board bill. I brought it up at the Planning Commission as well. This is not something that has been in secret. It is not something that I have hidden. It is something that I have been very plain and clear about in terms of my concern with respect to this issue. So my apologies if you feel as though this is a surprise to you, or that I'm trying to gotch you, but I am happy to work with you on it. Typically if someone is telling me that, something is not legal, I would like to have a legal opinion on that. So my concern though is I would like to vote for the bill, but I want to do that and be mindful of our position as a city with respect to protecting particularly our trans community, but other protected classes as well. I'm again willing to work with you, but I would like to make sure that we are being thoughtful in how we're addressing those concerns.
Yeah, Alderman Cone, I'm glad you brought up the part about being thoughtful, because I think that we all are on this. But we want to be respectful of the process as well, and the steps that have been taken prior to this. I don't know if they're, so just for people that are watching, this is part of the legislative process. Amendments can be made in committee. I always advocate for them to be made in committee because again, this is the part of the process where you all can participate, but it's not the last shot. Okay, so I think that the risk on us taking, and I hope I'm not overstepping, but my heart won't let me not say the risk on us taking a vote for this, they will be misunderstood that a vote against this amendment is a vote against the spirit or the message or the position of this amendment, and that's clearly not the case on any of our parts here as committee members. So, I mean, I would fully commit that the work that you all have just both publicly committed to, if it goes through and this is legal and we can do it, then I will be the first to be on that floor and stand up with you, Alderman Cone, and have it, if you would be amenable to doing it like that. I don't, again, want to overstep the sponsor, but I just, the risk of the misinterpretation of us voting on this amendment without the full context, which we know the media, I think would cause, would create confusion that we don't need in this work, in the work that's been done. So again, I'm going to yield to the sponsor. I'm going to absolutely yield to you as well, Alderman Cone. And it's nothing against, I hope you know that, it's nothing against this amendment or your position or your passion on this, but this is just what I felt like I needed to publicly say, and then I will yield to you all's decision on it.
Yeah, I'm happy to work with you, Alderman Cone. I've done my best to work with, all of you. I just think to work with you, I just have to know where you're at and how you're feeling. I promise that if I would have known prior to this that you really, hey, I really want to visit this city councilor, can we please just go make sure, even if you would have requested the opinion, I would have, done the work to do that. I just simply didn't know that, that's where you were. I thought, hey, legal told us what they told us in planning commission. We put in the question. I thought that had met your concerns, and you haven't brought it up to me since. So it's not that I don't support this or I'm willing to. I am willing to. I just didn't know this is where you were. But absolutely, happily, you know, I have personal ties to this issue. I've talked about that over and over again. I certainly am aware that one of the largest groups in need of this hopeful legislation is youthful LGBTQ. So absolutely, I think this, we should absolutely have this conversation. I just don't, I want to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's. So I think it would be better for, if you're okay for me to, us to take a vote on the bill with the amendments, which again, even those amendments that I brought to you today, I went and, talked to the necessary departments and talked to the mayor's office to get those things that were brought forward to a point that worked with the legislation. So it's not that I'm against it or unwilling to do the work at all or not being thoughtful. This entire bill is the result of over a year of thoughtfulness. It is that, I just want to make sure we stay on par and that we do what we can. So it would be my preference for us to take a vote on the bill as amended, and I will send the email today before we leave committee. I'll put you in it, and I'm happy to go have the conversation with the mayor's office and with the city councilor about what we can do about this.
Okay. Again, Alderwoman, I was pretty plain about this, particularly in our conversation, but also in the Planning Commission, where I brought this up, and they specifically, deflected to the legislative process. So when the Planning Commission says, that this is a concern that would have to be raised up through the board bill, that's where, that opportunity arises. And that's why I am taking that opportunity now to have that conversation. I was, hoping that tonight was going to be a public hearing so that we could get, feedback from the community with respect to your board bill, and that we would have additional opportunities to have conversations around amendments. So I put the amendment together this evening because it was clear that this was coming to a vote tonight. And I think it's an important topic that needs to be discussed, which is something that I had already shared with you previously. And so, again, happy to work with you. I'm a little mixed on my vote in terms of the committee right now, because I think that this is something that absolutely needs to be in the bill. But, this is a bill which you and I have had conversations about, that I'm supportive of, the spirit of the bill for sure. I've been helpful, last session and this session with respect to your bill. But this is, it's it's something that is, very personal, and also very important that we address. And I appreciate your commitment to doing so. I'll withdraw my amendment and look forward to your email.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move forward with the questions. Alderman Cone, did you want us to come back to you, or was your amendment basically you want to keep in conversation moving forward?
I don't have anything further,
Okay.
Alderwoman, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Swicer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's I've been thinking about this bill a lot, and obviously we've talked about it hours and hours and hours and hours and hours at this point. And I appreciate every moment that you've taken to talk with me about it. It's been a really long road to get to this committee hearing, and when the bills in terms of where we are today versus how this process started, it's a huge difference in what you introduced. Gosh, when was that? A year? November of last year. Okay, so it's been a while. And I remember reading those bills and being very concerned about what those bills would do for my ward, and I had a lot of people in my ward who reached out to me and were very against those bills, and I posted why I was against the bills and had a long kind of point by point of all the different things that I was against about those bills. And I think you probably got that from a lot of different people, either on the board or in the community. And from that, what I want to say that I just really respect about you is that you didn't take that and shut your door. I think honestly you really opened it wider. You've come to my community meetings multiple times now in some of the areas of my ward that have been most vocally against the bill and what you've been trying to do. And the bill that you have in front of us today is hugely different than what was presented early in this process. The number one thing for me is maintaining plat and petition. That is very clearly a non-negotiable for, I'd say, a majority of my ward and the people I represent. One of the things that we do as legislators, we're representative government. We're the person who sits in this seat representing the entire ward, that we represent. And so I try to be very thoughtful in my votes and my questions about, not necessarily what I think as an individual, but what does my ward think and how can I most represent them? And their number one thing, what they've said over and over again, is they are just not in support of removing plat and petition from this process. That is really important to me because it's important to them. This bill, of course, doesn't touch plat and petition, as we've talked about numerous times. The things that's, I think, the most concerning to me about the bill isn't necessarily what's in the bill, but what's been presented around the bill, in terms of saying currently plat and petition isn't being touched. Currently, this isn't in the bill. This isn't what we're talking about. If I support this bill, then we are in a position where we have a conditional zoning, these special residential units uses, no matter the size of them, no matter what, are in the same conditional use bucket as anything else. And that makes me nervous in terms of thinking about this bill going into effect and then in the future coming back and not having plat and petition. And I think that makes my constituents nervous too. I mean, you've answered a lot of questions that they've had about what that looks like, what that means, and can you answer, I guess, one more time? This bill doesn't touch plat and petition. What happens, in a few months if plat and petition is back on the table? I mean, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, absolutely. So this bill is specifically kept to Chapter 26, which is just about special residential uses. And we intentionally left Chapter 25, which is where everything plat and petition related for this process falls under. So again, they would have to engage that process before they would even get any of the benefits of the legislation that we're discussing today that's in front of us. They would have to do that and have those signatures verified before they could even access anything that this bill offers as far as a pathway forward.
Right. And, I know you're not you're not addressing in this bill. I think if there is a plat petition bill on its own that comes in front of the board, I can't see it moving forward out of committee, maybe, but out of the full board with this current group of people. I don't see it moving, which I think is really important. But of course, that's not what's in front of us. It hasn't moved. You know, the first time that you tried to have plat petition in a bill, didn't make it out of committee. Then when plat and petition was changed, was it 30%?
33.
33%, you know, didn't make it out of the board. So I think just touching plat and petition is not a popular thing with this board as it is right now. You know that. That's why it's not in this bill. You knew that you wanted to have something that would pass. Does that sound correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So, you know, I am worried about a future in which it is back on the table and what will happen. But I know that's not what we're discussing now. Some of the things that I think were really important to point out that people brought up today, and I think people said this on both sides, support or not supportive, there's no guarantee that any new special residential use will open because of this bill.
Correct.
Right. And I think that is good and bad. You know, I think people in this room would probably say that is good and bad, whether you're supportive or not supportive. You know, there is clearly a need for more shelters in the region. And I think, of course, you know, there is more need for shelters in the region. The city of St. Louis does bear the most of the responsibility and most of the work for housing people. I don't think this bill is not going to change that. A regional plan is probably not going to change that. You know, I think I really appreciate the testimony from our last speaker. I apologize, I didn't catch your name, about, you know, what the difference is between St. Louis and St. Charles, and in terms of what's supported and what people are saying and what the plan is. You know, one of the things that in my ward that comes up the most, and it was brought up by, I believe Dallas is your name. We have people who are getting into vacant buildings, starting fires, burning them down. That is affecting people in every corner of my ward. I don't think this bill addresses that. This bill doesn't do anything for that. You know, so while I think there's things that are really improvements in this bill, I don't think we're not solving the topic here. You know, the predictable and transparent framework. One of the gentlemen who spoke used that language, and I appreciate that for the operational plan piece, because I do think that's helpful. I do think that's helpful. I know I feel like I'm talking in circles right now, because the bill is both, you know, we're talking about what's on paper versus what a spirit might be. You know, what's on paper, this bill does not change plat petition. So it still means that, you know, the biggest barrier for opening new shelters space is still in place. It doesn't guarantee anyone anything. It doesn't set a goal for how many beds that's going to be made. But it does create an operational plan process. It does say to a shelter operator that if you get through the plat petition process, you might get through this conditional process, but that's a meeting and a hearing too, and public input's welcome and going to be included, and you might not get through that. So I just, you know, I keep hearing the goal of, like, this is to open more shelters. I don't see that this bill is going to do that. And I don't know how to, you know, that's where I'm struggling with. It's like, we're voting on a bill that I don't think is going to create more beds necessarily, knowing that we do have a huge problem in the region. But the main concern that I had isn't being changed with the bill. So I guess I'm trying to get to the point, like, it's a confusing place to be. You know, it's like the main problem I had is not part of this bill, which I appreciate.
Yeah, you know, and I want to just first of all thank you for your thoughtfulness and thank you for your engagement, and let you know that especially after coming to multiple of your community spaces, you know, your constituents and hearing their concerns in the room, myself, getting to be face to face from them, getting to explain to them my intention, getting to say, hey, I want you to put the past in the past, and giving me the opportunity to say, listen, I understand that I don't directly represent you, and I understand that you might be strongly opposed to what you've seen. But my ask is that we center the human beings, and we center where we are as a city, and that we address what we can. And so I think the question about the vacant buildings and the squatters, I would say from my lens, no. I mean, no bill we've passed is going to completely solve any bill. We need a CCOPS bill. We're not going to automatically know overnight how much surveillance the police has. We've done legislation on TIFs and abatements, and yet still have continuing conversations and continuing questions. We've not solved the problem of completely doing equitable development. We've done short-term regulation legislation. We've not solved the problem, and now every short-term regulation that's in our city operates greatly, and we have no problems. No bill, no one bill that any of us is going to sponsor is going to solve any one issue holistically. I think the benefit of where we are is we get such a macro view and a micro view. As local leaders, we get a micro view because we're hands-on in our community, and go each other's communities. Then macro, we get to dig through the codes, we get to see what's wrong, and we get to say, hey, I've identified these systematic things that I think we should change. And so in terms of vacancy and squatters, no, this bill will not get rid of squatters. However, I think one of the benefits of a bill like this is like we do have all these empty buildings, and maybe we should use them to offer services. Our city is full of vacancy. It's full of buildings that could be used for these purposes, but right now when providers apply, they're not even allowed within the code. So what if we were just to give them access to put, things where they are in the city? So I don't think that it's gonna, solve this one problem. And and Alderwoman Schweitzer, if I could propose one bill that would address the unhoused and wave a magic wand and everybody is housed, I absolutely would. Even if somebody was like, hey, would you give up the ability to be reelected if you could make sure that everyone in your city had housing? And I would be like, well, that might be a worthwhile transaction. We just don't have the ability to, to do that. I did also hear you say, I'm concerned about what will come after this. I think that change is really scary. And I think that moving forward can be very uncomfortable. And I think that it does open doors. But I think having a process that played out, that left, one bill not getting out of committee, left another bill falling short on the floor, and honestly left me in tears, should be reassurance to all of us that we do have a democratic process in place. And if we don't have the will for it or the body for it, then it won't happen. And hopefully that serves as a protection to your constituents. Obviously as the sponsor of this bill, as someone who's deeply passionate about it, my ask to you would be that we center where we are right now in this moment. Where is our community? What are our community's needs? What can we do in this moment to meet those needs? And I swear to you, if I showed you my calendar, I have put in so much time and so much resources and had so many difficult conversations with so many people from so many different places because I just was like, I want to do something. It's no way that we have these issues going on in our city and we can't do anything. So now we're at the bare bones, we're at the minimum. We know that shelters are not allowed anywhere in our code within the city of St. Louis. We know the history of our city. We know racially and class why that may be the case, that tattoo parlors and gunshots and payday loan shows and liquor stores have been allowed in our codes, but these facilities haven't. We know why. And so my ask is let's focus on that. Let's get this done. And I can't make any promise about what will come because I'm one of 15. I'm not the only one who can propose legislation. We got an election coming up. Who knows how things could shift? Who knows how things could change? But where we are in our positions of power right now, we can amend our zoning code to allow for these facilities on a conditional basis after they complete plat and petition with the requirement of an operational plan and with density language. We do have the power to do that right now, and we do know, just even based off of last time the room has so much more opposition in it, that this is something that has found much more of a sweet spot. It's never going to work for everyone, just like none of us are ever going to get 100% of the vote, but perhaps we have found something that most works for the majority and will allow for the city to do something that the departments are saying is a good move, and that the mayor's office is saying is a good move, and that the president's office is saying is a good move, and that providers are saying is a good move, and that a system that we all engage in regularly, we know we need to do something. So that would be my ask to you.
And I really appreciate that. I appreciate that. That's I always appreciate the passion in which you speak about this issue, and we all have different things that we champion here at the board. So I appreciate the amount that you've put into this. I just bare bones. It keeps the plot and petition process. It strengthens a informational piece that has not been provided. In my community, when we've had shelters come, they have an idea maybe of what they want to do, but without having it in writing, all of these questions that are being asked, all of that would be very helpful to my constituents, whether or not they're going to sign knowing that I really appreciate you making the amendment to have someone, the provider affirm that this is the operational plan people signed on, and you better believe that if it's not, they will find out at the conditional use hearing, and then they would hopefully not be qualified anymore. I think the concerns I have are the concerns from any of those businesses that you mentioned that do go through the conditional use process. There are concerns that people have about the enforcement of the laws on these businesses. We have issues all the time of, whether it's a business that is, noise after hours, or has gunshots outside of it, or whatever. And all of these businesses, if once they're open, it takes so long to close them. It is the enforcement piece is not where it needs to be, whether that's the building division, whether that's the police, whether that's whatever it is. Every single one of those groups is short-staffed. I would be a for sure no on this bill if it did not have the plat and petition piece at the beginning, because that I see is the main protection, because I do not believe that the conditional use process protects our neighborhoods as much as we wish it did if all of the enforcement pieces were there. I guess, I know you've gotten the affirmations from the building division, from zoning, that this is going to be, that I shouldn't be concerned about the enforcement, but I am concerned about the enforcement of what's in the operational plan. And I'm concerned, but more importantly, my constituents who've reached out to me about this are concerned. So, what assurance can you give me there?
I would, first of all, just start by being, I'm very honest. The conditional use process is not a perfect process. I've had things within the 7th Ward that I've had to advocate for and advocate against and try to figure out how to navigate the revocation process. So I think the most important thing is I would, if we were in a community room in your ward that you represent right now, I would say, I acknowledge that this is not a perfect process. And then I would say that, we have to choose from the things that exist within our city, and this is a process that's good enough for everything else. So I'm really proposing that if the conditional use process is something that everything else uses, and I don't have the ability to create a process from scratch, then let's give this the same process. I think that also we should keep in mind that our city is going through a zoning overhaul right now, and I think they may have some suggestions to improve the conditional use process. And I will also say that I have some ideas around the conditional use process, and even have a little bill drafted up in my drive right now about some improvements to that process. And so because it is one of the city's processes, we can work together on making sure that it gets to a better level as far as transparency, communities knows that it's happening, and things like that. So that's what I would tell them. And certainly it can take a while to bring things into the revocation process, but I will also uplift that right now with these facilities, if there's anything in your community that were to have problems, the building division does not have the enforcement mechanism to even hold them accountable to anything, because they don't go through the conditional use process. We don't have an operational plan from them. We can't say, hey, you told us you were going to do this, you're doing something different, and then hold you accountable accordingly. So I would say, like, this bill does not introduce a perfect process, but it does have a lot of thoughtfulness around using the process that's in place, adding the requirement of an operational plan to kind of catch for some of those things that the conditional use process might have left out, that experts like from the Department of Human Services who do the work can say, this is what we should ask. And then we'll have to just continue to see how it goes and continue to work on it. But I would not say that it's a perfect process. I would just say that with the holisticness of this bill, the largest concerns that some of the big issues we have right now with these special residential uses, some of the things we need in order to get a regional plan so that it becomes other people's. We can talk about what it looks like for it to be more of a joint responsibility. This legislation will take us closer to where we need to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the thing with the city zone, our zoning professionals could speak to this more than I could, but we have things that are conditionally allowed in zoning districts, and then things that need a variance. That's when it's not really allowed, and then it has to have special permission, because the only reason that the only place it can possibly go is that place, and that is overused right now. The variances there happen way too often. I had to fight a variance that went through my community car lot that should never have been. But it happens, so that we don't just have a conditional use process. You can also go through variances. There are uses in their city that are not permitted in are only permitted in industrial uses that are not permitted. They're not permitted conditionally, and they're not permitted, permitted in single family by right. They'd have to have a variance for it. So it's not like there isn't another process allowed in zoning districts. That it isn't like there isn't one that isn't used. It is used. The conditional piece we've talked about a lot with, why are zones A and B listed as conditional the same way that for any size shelter, the same way that it might be for a smaller shelter. And one of the things you mentioned is that the building division doesn't have the ability to enforce things now, and that's not true. They absolutely do, because every building in the city, especially if it's residential, there should be an occupancy amount of people that can be there. There should be some number, some idea of what their occupancy is. And there are plenty of things in our code that the building division could enforce on a bad actor now. That's not true that they could not possibly enforce things. Not true that the police couldn't enforce it. Very true that they could. But we have issues with enforcement in our communities because of staffing issues or various other things that occur. So the piece that we talked about with why zones in A and B are listed as conditional as opposed to having limits for number of beds is because most of the time in a single family residential zone, the available properties are going to limit what can be there. If you're talking about a 4-family flat or a 2-family or even a single family being used for a special residential use, you're not going to be able to put 100 beds in a single family, right? That is what our current zoning code that is not being, that's what our current, occupancy allowances would allow. Is that correct or not correct?
I don't want to speak to what I'm not 100% sure with current occupancy, but it is tied to the space that is where they're going. And then I would say too, it's not true that they can't do enforcement, but when you think about the type of enforcement that you might need at a special residential use, it's not, occupancy is like bare bones enforcement for a facility of these nature. So let's say that you have a transitional house where you're, hey, we're taking in women who are transitional homes for women with children. And we're also going to offer some substance use because we're going to specifically target people in the community who have a methamphetamine addiction and need help. We need to make sure not only for occupancy, but we need to have them in that operational plan, identify what staff will you have in that building. That's not an occupancy, the support that you'll have on site for them. And we need to have them identify what services you'll offer. So if you say that you're going to be serving people that might have, substance use issues, are there detox specialists on site? Do you have a plan in place for their withdrawal? Things like that. So when I'm saying that there's no enforcement, I'm saying that right now, the enforcement of the city of St. Louis is like if there's illegal activity or if it's occupancy. But for special residential uses and for the range of services and the very specific populations that they're aiming to stabilize and hopefully transition to being housed, we need much more enforcement, accountabilities. And on the back end, we need to be able to say if a provider should mislead a community and say, we're going to do 20 beds, and then they do 30 beds, that's not just about occupancy. They might be well within their rights according to occupancy, but with the bill, we'll be able to say, but you're doing 10 more than you said, and so you're in violation of your conditional use license.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate. I'm glad that you took the time to say that out loud during the committee hearings. That's something that we talked about on the phone about why zones A and B were not limited to a certain number of beds, within the zoning code. And I do think it's important when we think about what we're putting in place or what we might put in place if this were to pass, because knowing that we will likely have different zoning districts coming soon. So what every area of A transitions into, every area of B, so forth, is not going to line up exactly. So that would be very confusing to untangle, I would imagine. Yeah, I appreciate that. For me at this point, I'm ready to get this out of committee into the full floor. I would not be ready to commit, yes vote on the full floor. I'm sure if I vote, when I support this getting out of committee, I'm going to get a lot of phone calls, emails, text messages from some constituents, good and bad. So if you're out there listening and you live in the first ward, tell me what you think. I'm all ears. So I really appreciate how much this has changed. I think sometimes what I'm hearing feedback on from my constituents now is, not recognizing the huge amount of movement that you've made from where it was to where it is today. And that is a lot of it because people told you their concerns and you tried to make a bill that met the concerns while also making the process, someone said, predictable and transparent framework, and a balanced approach. And I appreciate those things. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk today with you. And let's keep it moving. Thank you.
Alderman Brownie.
Thank you. I know we've been here a long time tonight, and I want to echo the appreciation of the constant progress. Excuse me, let me get rid of this for a second.
Bring Stan back.
It's his birthday tomorrow. Anyway, I want to note, like, it's really difficult to build housing in the city. It's difficult to build housing of any kind in the city. We just went through extensive engagement in my neighborhood over a market rate proposal, and that saw a lot of pushback. So when we talk about, rising rents and we talk about the lack of housing, a lack of affordable housing, it's all linked and it's all difficult to build. But a big part of that is adding predictability into the process. I understand the concerns around this bill. I've gotten communication from my constituents with concerns too. Looking at the process this has taken and what this bill is not, as Alderwoman Schweitzer pointed out, is not revising plat and petition. In fact, quoting Don Rowe's letter to the Planning Commission, it says the updated proposal is not aimed at making it easier for special residential uses to open in the city. Rather, it intends to, one, create a more clear and predictable zoning pathway in which special residential uses will be evaluated and permitted. Two, to preserve opportunities for community input. And three, to provide the city with some more transparency into shelters and transitional housing facilities. I want to thank the planning staff and the zoning staff and the building division for their work with Alderwoman Saunier on this bill. I also want to thank Casey Milberg from the mayor's office for also working on this. And I also want to thank everyone who came and testified today, as well as STL TV for staying late and running this meeting. We'll try to wrap it up as fast as possible. I just want to say, back in the spring, I advocated and asked for these changes to be made in the zoning code instead of being made in the building code, which is where 227 was making them. And I also asked for a tiered process when it came to plat and petition to evaluate community impact, knowing that different types of housing have different types of impacts on their community. I'm really happy to see today that this is being done in the zoning code, so we're not duplicating processes. That's really important to me. And I understand, as it's been explained to me, that the tiered process with plat and petition wasn't possible due to staffing issues with the city and enforceability. So I understand concerns around that too. But any change that we make to plat and petition in the future, I also want to be clear, needs to take into account the impact to the community that different types of housing has. We cannot just do a blanket lowering of plat and petition without really communicating with the public and preserving their voice in this process and making sure that whatever we're saying can go into their neighborhoods is not going to have a negative impact on them as well. This isn't a either or situation. It's a both and situation. We have people to care about in our communities that include the unhoused, and it also includes people that we represent, in our neighborhoods. I know the benefit that good housing provides in my community. The 9th Ward has the second most amount of affordable housing in the city. We have excellent providers from Independent Center, Doorways, and more that I can't mention because they deserve confidentiality. But a lot of residents who live near these facilities don't even realize they're there. Don't even realize they live on the same block as someone a place that's reaching out and bringing in people straight off the street, people who are unhoused, and giving them help, giving them wraparound services, because a well-run provider is almost barely noticeable. So I remain optimistic that, with the community feedback that we still have in place through plat and petition, that we can get to a point where we are hopefully opening some more shelters. And that's why I'm happy to vote for this today. I think the most important thing is that predictability. No matter what kind of housing we're building, that we offer a predictable process. And since this bill is made to give more predictability to that process, I think that's really the most important thing. So I don't have any additional questions at this time. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and let's wrap this up so we can go home. Thanks.
Alderman Aldridge.
It's funny the alderman said go home as he's at home. Um, it's been a long day, so I'll keep it short because we also got staff members who have been here since 8 o'clock this morning and have to come back to work at 8. But also know that this is an important conversation that's been going on for a very long time. I want to, as an alderwoman from the first set of the buses everywhere, I kind of want to bring the bus back to this piece of legislation and also get her concerns. And one thing, we have to remember, yes, all our wards are different. So I do respect and understand, where she's coming from to ensure that she is doing her job as what the people represented her in the ward to do. But I want to say when it comes to this bill, I think one of the speakers talked about how this is the bare minimum of I think this is a fourth kind of iteration of the pieces of the legislation that you brought forward. This isn't, as we continue to talk about what it could be and this isn't plat and petition. This is cutting some red tape when it comes to special residential use. And you have done the work with every entity that is possible. It always shocks me sometimes when we get in committee hearings and the first question we usually ask each other's colleagues is, did you do your homework with departments? And it sounds like you didn't just do your homework with the departments, you went above and beyond. You've listened to your colleagues. You have over and over on the floor said it every week to the point where I get annoyed and I say quit saying it, of asking your colleagues to come. And I know some members on this committee actually took that invitation. And you went all across the city to actually hear, because sometimes we may have our own insight of just our own ward, but we have to understand the city is diverse and we're all very different, north, south, east, west. I know this isn't a bill that isn't going to fix our unhoused. I know this isn't going to be the magic wand that will get people off the streets. And as somebody who has, as I always say, the most unhoused facilities within the city of St. Louis, this won't do it, but I do think this is a step forward. And sometimes we cannot let, imperfection be the process.
Perfection be the enemy of good.
Perfection of the enemy of good. Thank you, Alderwoman, from the first ward. See, we just so entwined right now. We can't let perfection be the enemy of good. And I think this is a huge step forward of continuing to look, a huge step forward for the city of St. Louis when you're looking at how do we move forward when it comes to our unhoused community. And some of us also need to remember that we all can just be one check away from being unhoused. And if that were to happen, we would want somebody not to give us a handout, but a hand up. And I think this piece of legislation is giving a hand up to so many people that can at least see hope. If this isn't the ribbon on the box, at least there's hope that the city is moving forward outside of the regional conversations that are happening. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. And St. Louis has to act, and hope our regional partners also act. But all that being said, to wrap it all up, I just commend you for the hard work that you've put into this. I'm honored to be a co-sponsor, and I look forward to banging with you on the floor to get this across the finish line.
So noted.
I was already a co-sponsor if I wasn't, but double co-sponsor.
So we noting it again. All right. So did you have any one round, going once, going twice, and did you have any closing remarks?
I have feel like I've been up here forever. It's been so long. I think I've told many of you in your conversations where I'm at, how I feel. I'm always surprised when I get up here and start talking about this and those emotions just come out because I'm actually a very logical person, and it's just like you just talking and it just comes out. But I like again, I just want to thank. We still have people here in the crowd and in the audience with us. We have people that are, online. While I'm sitting here, I've gotten so many messages from so many different people who are watching on YouTube. I think for me, this has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I have done quite some things. I was on the school board at 25. I graduated at the top of my class. I got almost a perfect score on my ACT. I've been a scholar all my life. I've helped run political campaigns. I've helped the school district get money. But this topic has been the hardest thing I've ever done. And honestly, I think that part of that is because I needed some growth and some refinement as a leader in a new space. I think that I needed to become more familiar with the democratic process. I needed to get to know my colleagues a little bit more. I needed to go to your community. Because sometimes when we're sitting here, we just hear each other. And, two things have happened. I've gained such more respect for my colleagues. I've gained a lot of respect and more understanding of departments and the work that you all have to do. Having to look and say, how many applications do you all go through? What is the staffing time on this? What's the budget? And really seeing how many projects you all are holding and engaging, because the city is at a point of transformation, because we do have so many people amongst us who recognize that despite all of the hate that the city of St. Louis gets, I think we are one of the best cities, and I think that our best days are ahead of us. And so I challenged myself this next round to be very humble and to center the issue. Times where it would have made sense to give a snarky response, or it might have made response to snap back, I would go in my head and say, you know what, Alicia Sanye might want to do that, but Alderwoman, do you want to move this issue forward? And are you willing to be humble and just kind of take the hits? Because if you take the hits, but at the end of the day, we amend the city zoning code, them hits was worth every swing, and I'd stand up and I'd take them again. And so I just want to thank you all. And, if I could go to all of y'all wards and tell your constituents what great public servants you were, I would. I want to make sure that I thank the 7th Ward, because you all have just really, you ask me about this bill at every single neighborhood meeting almost. You come to my office hours and ask me about it. You email me about it, and I've been telling you for months and months and months I'm working on it. And as soon as it was time to bring something forward, you all lined up with droves of support and supportive emails. And now I know when I check my phone, saying good job, thank you. So I just, want to thank you all. And again, I think just in ending remarks, I do believe that housing is a human right. And one of the things that's so weird to me about this conversation is this conversation about, well, does this type of housing belong in a residential area? But it's a residential area where human beings live. So for me, it's been interesting, like walking that part of it out of like, what type of housing do people think belongs in communities? And sometimes that's a silent way of saying, what kind of people do we think belongs in communities? And so it's just been so nice to like learn all these things, learn the intricacies of how they work, and to really grow as a woman, as a leader, as an alder, grow in my relationships with you, because we have had some hard conversations, but I think they've made us closer. I think they've allowed me to understand you all more, and I think that our city will benefit from that. I think that petty leadership that's very individualistic is a part of what has caused St. Louis's decline, and so I've been happy to be at the center and to have an opportunity to swallow all of my negativity, center the people, center the policy, and do that. And you all have been great folks to do it with. So, again, this bill did not fall out of a coconut tree. And at the end of the day has to end. And so with that, I would like to ask for you all's favorable recommendation, with a do pass recommendation for Board Bill 114 as amended.
I'd like to make a motion that we pass Board Bill 114 as amended.
Second.
Previous row.
It was moved by Alderman Aldridge, seconded by Alderwoman Schweitzer, with a call for previous roll, with any objections? No objections. I'm sorry, Alderman Cone.
Was that a pass with a do pass recommendation?
Yes. And then there was a
Okay,
call for previous role.
I have no problem with previous role.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations, Alderman Sain. Hey, y'all been clapping all night. I was gonna say, I know y'all gonna clap now. No, y'all gonna clap now. All right, any resolutions for review?
We have none.
Any resolutions for review?
We have none.
No committee discussions?
We have none.
Acknowledgements of any written testimony?
Probably have a lot.
One moment. 18 in favor, 5 in opposition.
All right. And those will be in the drive. They're available for us as alders to look through those anytime. And we also received some emails as well. So I definitely want to acknowledge those. And we have all taken those into consideration and continue to take those into consideration. Any additional announcements? Alderman Aldridge?
Thank you. I would invite everybody to check out the paintings come back. They'll be up for a while. They are from an artist from the 14th Ward. Second announcement, we appreciate y'all so much. But after this is over, I'm sure STO TV and Tracy would love for us to exit out to be able to celebrate so that they can get out of here. And I do want to thank the staff and STO TV for all the hours and work for making this happen as well. So thank you.
All right. All members are present this evening. With that, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, previous role.
Objection.
It was moved, seconded, previous row, no objection. Everyone have a blessed night. Get home safe.
Roll call.